Hello, everybody, and welcome to what might be the last call ever. Maybe it kind of depends on what me and Cam can come up with. But this is the Last Call podcast. I am Kyle Malone, and I am joined, as always, throughout this entire now year-long show, basically. Yeah. Just about. We started in February of 2019. So, Cam, welcome, as always. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Yourself?
I leveled up today. I became a level 10 25-year-old. So it's always cool when you gather enough experience points to level up. And for some reason, it happens around the same time every year for me. But the non-aging thing is great. Right. Eternally 25.
Eternally 25. So, how many times have you leveled up from 25 at the moment?
This is my 10th one. Yep.
See, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in the UK, but in America, the way our car insurance works, based on statistics, males are dangerous drivers from 16 to 25. Yeah. And then our tendency to get into car accidents and reckless driving drops. Yeah. So at the age of 25, you actually have an insurance rate drop because you move down a bracket of what's the word I'm looking for? Risk. Yeah. Like your risk bracket drops. So, like whenever I used to joke about, becoming an immortal, like Highlander style, or if you became a vampire, like 25 is the age you want to be. So that way, at least for eternity, you have lower car insurance rates.
I wouldn't be 25. I would be sort of, I think 29, 30, honestly.
What, really?
Yeah.
Why?
But then I'm a little bit older because I think there's wisdom in age as well. And I think
you're going to continue to get wisdom for eternity. But
I know, but I think your body is actually can be in its peak around about sort of 29, 30. If you look at most athletes, that's usually when they reach the peak. Once they go above 30, really good ones maybe push on, and it depends on the sport, of course. But if we look at something high intensity like soccer, probably football, as they call it, hockey. Yeah, I understand soccer more, obviously, coming from the UK, and you're kind of on the road down from 30 onwards. But the greatest players maybe can still do it at 36, 37. But I mean, by the time 40, you're out, you're done, you're retired.
Yeah. I think. Welcome to Last Call Sports Edition. I think for us, our oldest athletes tend to be in baseball. There's some hockey players like Jaromir Jagr that have played into their 40s. There's some football players. Tom Brady, I think, will be 41 this year. Play into their 40s.
Of course, it might depend on positions
baseball,
as well in these kind of games.
Yeah, it depends on the positions. Exactly.
Like in soccer, the goalkeeper usually lasts longer because he doesn't have to run about at the same level as the rest of the players.
And that's kind of like certain fielding positions in baseball. Your pitchers don't last that long because their arms burn out. Your heavy hitters don't last as long because their arms burn out. But your like average good player that's good enough to help the team win, I see more of them lasting into their 40s than most others. But
so there you go, folks.
It is what it is.
Join in with if you were immortal, what age would you like to stick at? Edition. We'll be back next week with more immortal news.
So let's talk about what we actually came to talk about.
That movie franchise.
Not sports, not not immortality,
Star Wars.
but Star Wars, specifically the Skywalker Saga in its entirety.
Which
Go
can
ahead.
we establish right away? Should if it's a saga, it's supposed to be one story, yeah. That has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And and I think we're going to take it from that point of view, aren't we? That's the point of this, to critique it, not just to necessarily say this film good, this film bad, but to look at this as one entire story and
Yes.
how the different sort of parts come together.
And certain threads that go through all three trilogies, things that should have carried on but didn't. Does the ending feel like a real ending when you look at all of it together? That's what we're discussing today. I call it a post-mortem.
Yeah.
Is what I called it. I had brought up the idea of doing a post-mortem on the MCU after Endgame, which Breaking Geek Radio, they did that, and I knew I wanted to do something similar for our show, which just took a lot longer to get here because we had to wait for episode 9. So, yeah. But it's come, it's gone, it's done. We know that at least John Boyega and Oscar Isaac, from outside appearances, have absolutely no interest in ever doing anything as Finn and Poe again.
It doesn't sound like it, but then, somebody would have said that about Harrison Ford in 1984 or something like that, and he's a back.
And
so
money,
it depends what
talks.
age you get and how much work you're still getting, and when
Exactly.
that fat paycheck suddenly becomes relevant again,
Yeah.
And people just change their mind sometimes. It's like, what's his name? Daniel Craig always talks about how, every James Bond film he makes, he thinks, I don't want to do this again. And then after a little while, he's like, yeah, I do. The money's really good. It's a good job. I'm back in.
Yeah.
And then he has that moment again. So it's like Robert Downey Jr., people, there was this whole thing about, should he come back and, could they bring him back? And the way the MCU works, they absolutely could have bring him back if they wanted to, because it's the MCU.
The time machine still exists.
Yes, but they absolutely should not, at least not for like another 10 years or something, and then they could bring him back as like in a special where they need to go to an alternate universe and get another Tony Stark, and maybe by that point Robert Downey Jr. would be like, it would be fun to come back for just one film again, actually, it's like that kind of thing can work, but I don't think does anybody really want to see what the next step is for Rey, Finn and Poe? That would kind of go against the whole, this was the end of the Skywalker saga for a start. So they kind of painted themselves into a little bit of corner there by, making it, they were very forceful in the marketing of saying this is the end of this saga. There's not going to be a 10, 11 and 12.
Yeah, and I do want to say this. I should have said it at the very, very warning, but this is a full spoilers discussion. So if you have not seen all 9 movies,
why you listening?
We're gonna say everything. I don't know, but just in case somebody's like, oh, post-mortem, they're going to talk about which ones they liked and didn't like. Well, we sort of might, but we're going to be talking about why.
And then come onto the comments, really disappointed. Have only seen 2 of these 9 movies. Wanted to get your opinions, and I'm really annoyed that you've spoiled them all for me. Well done, NRLM, you fucks.
Just in case it's that one person. That one person. There's your fucking spoiler warning. Anyways, continue on, Cam. The ad campaigns and pushing the idea.
Which wasn't, I think we talked about this a little bit, that it wasn't so prevalent leading up to this final film. This was 7, 8 and 9, but you didn't get that kind of constant rhetoric coming out about how this is the end until really they got to that point. Now, perhaps that's just a marketing strategy for how to sell that final movie. It's kind of part of that whole thing, but I think if at the end of the Force Awakens they had turned around and said, actually, we're going to do 10, 11 and 12 as well, I don't think they would have had an amazing blowback on that. People would have went, okay, maybe this story is going to develop a little bit more slowly than we kind of first thought. And in hindsight, maybe that would have given them a little bit more time to do something else and a clear definition of where they were going to go forward, because it would have been more like a starting point again rather than a, you could have gone back to, you could have really started this story with Ben and Luke and how they turned in the first place. I mean, maybe a different story would have been developed, but there could have been a lot more in there to kind of lead on to further things. The likes of
they could have
when we get to the Palpatine stuff, and if they wanted to link it back to the Sith in some way, they would have had more time to kind of subtly build that up, and instead they just kind of thrown all that into the final movie and the way they did, which some people like, but I don't think there's very many LRMers are loving that final movie, is there really? Is there anybody who's said, I thought it was great? So. I mean, we predicted Seth would like it after we had seen it, and Seth took ages to watch it, but I think he was almost just as critical as the rest of us on that one, to be honest.
Yeah, he seemed to like that, some of the thumb in the eye of episode 8 stuff, but he wasn't like, oh my god, this is my favorite, or my second or third favorite, or fourth or fifth favorite,
No, because he would definitely have some of the prequels above that film, I think.
Yeah. So, I'll save my question. Let me write it down, so that way I can remember after this. All right, so let's go ahead and go all the way back to 1999 and the prequel trilogy.
The prequel trilogy. So exciting though, when we the got build up. It doesn't seem that long now. See, when you look back now and you say Return of the Jedi finished in 1983 and we get Phantom Menace in 1999, you're like, that's really not that long. It's 16 years. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like a long time. But as a child, for me, it felt like eternity. It felt like they would never make any more Star Wars films, because when I was just a little kid when they stopped, and they still hadn't done any more, So when they actually announced that they were going to do this back in the late 90s, obviously it came out in 1999, the whole sort of fandom was just in pure hype mode, and this was pre-internet days as well, so you were buying fucking magazines in the shop that were showing you behind the scenes photos, of the Phantom Menace, and going, ooh, what's this,
and going to the movie theater, buying tickets to see a trailer, buying tickets for a movie you had no plans on watching, just because you found out that the episode 1 trailer was attached to it.
Yeah,
and
that's the kind of hype that Star Wars had.
You really had people doing that,
because it had this time to mature. It had this time to. At the time, it was this silly popcorn blockbuster flick, and adults of the time, that was pretty fun, space lasers and all that. But it was the youth that it captured and everything that it inspired after that. That it was built up in people's heads, and some people say, the originals aren't that good. It's the way you look back on them now. But I fell in love with them again as an adult. After knowing everything about them as a kid, because I think there were deeper layers in it. There were more there that you could pick out, little nice film
more
making
that you can
things,
appreciate with your own maturity.
Yeah, character nuances
other
in
things
there
you can
some
pick
people
up
look
on
past. Like people don't think Mark Hamill's performance is that good, but when you see other people perform with puppets, you know, he does that so well. You know, he actually is completely believable. The fact that Harrison Ford goes on to become this megastar, because he's just a movie star. He's just one of those people you look up and you think, yep, there's a movie star. And you know, they had managed to get him in as well, so they found a gem there as well that would go on to other things. So you know, it had so many things going for it, which I think it was unfair for the prequel trilogy to have to live up to. I don't think it ever could live up to that.
No.
However, it didn't just not live up to it. It was pretty bad, wasn't it? When we look back on it now.
It was really bad. I was 14 years old when episode 1 hit the big screen in May of 1999. And so I was right on that edge to where I could have been into it, you know. Mostly your 9s and 10-year-olds that the people that are, you know, 4 or 5 years younger than I am. You're under 30s right now. They fucking the prequel trilogy is gems to them. You have some that can admit that the Phantom Menace, especially Jake Lloyd, has some really bad moments, but to them, especially Revenge of the Sith is a top tier Star Wars movie to them. It's top 3 for a lot of under 30s, and for some ungodly reasons, some people around their 40s.
I think when you debate it with people, though, I think what you find with the prequel trilogy is that they go, yeah, okay, you're right about this, okay, you're right about that. However, what I see is this, or what I'm looking for is that. And I'm thinking to myself, those people that love the prequels are looking for a different experience from Star Wars than the people of, I think, my generation that grew up and fell in love as super fans with the original trilogy, because they weren't just popcorn movies. That's why it was a cut above all the other things at the time, because they just had that little bit. Everything just came together so well. The cast, the music, the effects, the story, how it caught people's imagination, just took off. And the prequel trilogy just doesn't have any of that. All it has is some, I'll use quotation marks here, cool lightsaber fights. Yeah. And laser guns and Dark Lords. And some people, you know, that's it. Yeah, that I like that. That's what I want.
It looked cool. I've often said that Star Wars is a damn near religious experience. For some people, seeing the original trilogy the first time, whether you were old enough to see Jedi in theaters, right?
Yes, that was one of the first films I ever saw in theaters. I was about 5 years old, roughly, or almost 5.
Right, but both of us were young, 5-ish, 4 or 5-ish, seeing these movies for the first time. But definitely by the time we're seeing them, you know, maybe the second or third time on TV or recorded HBO VHSs like my parents had them, I'm having an experience, right? And so I'm in that weird case where I'm too old for the PT, just about, but too young to have experienced the OT in theaters. But I did get to experience the OT in theaters in '97, and while yes, it was the special edition, and there were some changes that were really really bad. Most of the changes for this special edition were passable. They were fine. They were aesthetic
especially
changes.
The stuff to A New Hope, which you know did genuinely suffer from a lack of budget, running out of time, just running out of money, running out of ideas at times as well. And when it comes to that final space battle, it does all look, when you look at the original version, it is very sparse. It's like it doesn't feel like a big battle, and they did their best to try and kind of get in and see the idea of this dogfight, and all of that stuff works really well. The Jabba thing was a misstep.
Yeah.
But,
We'll get there when we get to the. I just wanted to say that I got to have that near religious experience 2 years before the prequel. So, just like you, I've had this experience with the OT, and that's what I'm looking for with the prequel trilogy. I'm looking for the mythology. I'm looking for, oh my God, you're gonna show me young Anakin and young Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm gonna see the world before the Empire, the height of the Jedi, all this stuff I'm looking for, and it just turns out that the height of the Jedi is fucking techno dancing. That's the height of the fucking Jedi, techno dancing, and then in Revenge of the Sith, letting Palpatine cut you down because the fucking choreographer is a fucking idiot. But we'll get there. But episode 1 comes out in 1999. Everybody freaks out about the trailer. The movie's released. I see it midnight preview. And I'm left not knowing if I liked it or not. We mentioned this in depth in our episode 1 episode of Last Call, which you guys can find here on the LRM Podcast Network. But that was to me, that was the most nervous thing, and I never got over that for the next movie coming out. I'm like, I'm still not even sure. Like, I know there's parts of episode 1 I like, and there's parts that I hate, but now we're doing this time jump, this massive time jump. You're going to have this love story. Like, I was concerned about Attack of the Clones, besides the fact of its stupid ass title.
I like the title because it's that whole B movie thing, and we know the Clone Wars is coming up. It just kind of, it made, what's it going to be called? Attack of the Clones, and folk took a piss. And I thought, no, I like that. That makes me think, oh, what's going on with the clones and all that sort of stuff, So, because we didn't understand how it was all going to work back then, that it was stormtroopers, and although I like that idea, but that's the thing.
I'm fine with the way it was.
With Attack of the Clones, I still had hope. I still had hope. I thought, right, okay, it wasn't that good. It wasn't that good. If I'm going to rank the 4 of them at that point, I'm saying Phantom Menace is the lowest. But, okay, it's been a while. I think they did start it, as with, if you want to get really into the Phantom Menace, there's a podcast on there. We get really into the bones of it. We're not going to do that in this, but, there was a lot of things that we didn't like about the Phantom Menace, but at the time, I kind of may have looked past them, and better if some of those things had then been paid off a little bit better further down the line, or had improved. Ultimately, it was too kiddyish for me, and what I was looking for Attack of the Clones was, right, okay, now they're making Anakin an adult, so I'm expecting this to get, and it's the middle chapter. Empire was the darkest. I'm expecting this one to get a little darker this time.
It was plenty dark. He kills the sand people.
It is, but it's, thematically, the movie goes in the right direction for me. This is the problem with Attack of the Clones. I genuinely think, and although most people rank, Phantom Menace is my least favourite, your least favourite's Attack of the Clones, I would say you're more common. Most people I come across do say Clones is their least favourite of all Star Wars films. I don't think it's because of the meat of what the story is there. I think, a mystery, a secret clone army, finding out these clones, a former Jedi Master who seems to have went off on his own and is doing something. There's no sign of Darth Sidious at all. War on the horizon, Anakin struggling with certain things, the meat of that is there. The problem with Attack of the Clones is
execution.
When they put it together, it's like a 5-year-old took all those pieces and put them together, and the lines, the way they then
dialogue. Oh God,
the characters don't connect with each other. There's no chemistry between them because they don't have a script that allows you to build these relationships between the characters. But that's not the outline. The outline that I set out at the start is a good place to kind of jump off from. If you say, well, there's this guy, he's doing this, so and so are kind of here doing this at the time, they end up over there. The kind of blocks of it are fine, but that's not a story. That's just an outline. That's a computer game, or something like that. A story is when you then, change it, you develop the character. How would this person react to this? And and you write the dialogue that goes along with that, and you say how they bring these two people together. And nobody's doing that with the script and Attack of the Clones.
No,
they're not
at all. We're too busy with pushing technology and filming and digital and too worried about showing trying to set up Anakin as a soul torn in two between love and fear. And thirst for power, but they don't do it well at all.
You never understand what Anakin's motivations are. You don't feel, you by the end of episode 3, which we'll get to in a second, you should be like sympathizing with Anakin, not empathizing with him in terms of like that. I can understand why he made that decision, but us as the audience are looking at it from the outside. You can imagine yourself, would you have maybe made some of these bad decisions yourself if you were actually in there, not seeing things from the outside as we as the audience are? That's what a tragedy is. A tragedy is when the audience can see, this is coming and we don't want it to come, and run away, don't do this, don't do that, and then it finally happens and it's a tragedy we were all expecting. That's how you structure a tragedy. Everybody knows what's coming and then the inevitable happens anyway. And that's the kind of film, or that's what the prequel trilogy should have been. In as much as the sequel trilogy is the redemption story, this should have been the tragic fall. And Anakin is just so underdeveloped,
And not just underdeveloped, but I don't care what some of the under 30s want to say. There's not a single redeeming moment of acting from Hayden Christensen in this movie, in this trilogy, in both movies he played in.
If you'd have put Leonardo DiCaprio, who by the way was somebody that they were interested in at the time, let's just say, we go back in a time machine and we say to Lucas, throw money at him, get Leo, right? And he gets Leonardo DiCaprio. Does Attack of the Clones suddenly become a good film? Does it suddenly?
Because the dialogue still
because
sucks.
Unless Leonardo DiCaprio is also at this point in his life an expert writer, he's not going to be able to change the dialogue, and therefore his acting would feel so off because he wouldn't feel, why would I be doing this? Why would I be doing that? It wouldn't make any sense to him as an actor. As an actor, you need to kind of get into the character and feel what they were feeling.
It feels just like it does with Ewan McGregor. Here's Ewan McGregor cross. Not so much Phantom Menace. He does do decent, but he doesn't have a lot to do. But
he's trying. But he's an easier character to get right because he's the outside. That does everything right. He's got less. His drama is what happens to Anakin, but the main focus should be on. And the main performance that the audience are going to connect with has to be Anakin in that trilogy.
But like I was saying, like you're saying, bring in Leonardo DiCaprio, a Catch Me If You Can age and era Leonardo DiCaprio, not Titanic, just teen heartthrob, but guy that's actually proven that he can act. And
at that point, I don't think he was big enough to necessarily turn it down. I think they kind of looked over him. To be honest.
I mean, look at the documentary about the making of Episode 1 and the casting of Jake Lloyd and how shocked everybody is when George Lucas picks Jake Lloyd over the other kids.
Yeah, it's a shame. for that
and
kid,
and you're like, what the fuck did he see in him? Poor Jake Lloyd, whatever, dude.
As
Sorry,
we've said
you
before,
weren't that.
It's his fault for trying to cast a 10-year-old in the first place. Star Wars is not the place. There was no actual kids in the entire trilogy really at all,
No.
apart from maybe arguably Wicket. It's a fantasy, and in a fantasy, kids can be uncomfortable in a fantasy, so you kind of tend to try and, a lot of authors will try and write round about them because you don't want to get hung up on that aspect. You know, it's the... I don't think you just don't need to go with someone that young. It's
not only that, but I think Lucas is wrong when he says he always meant this to be for kids. It's an all ages thing, but all ages leans towards young adult. And then once you're hooked in as a kid or a young adult, that type of fandom for something can carry on. But all ages things. Look at the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's all ages appropriate. My 6-year-old has watched them all.
Yes. 5. He is absolutely daft on it. My son is daft on it. He's now 12. I'm daft on it, you know. So it's
same here. It's multi-gener, but it's aimed at its actual target audience is young adults. You're 16 to 25. That's like the bread and butter of where you're wanting your reference humor to come in at the young adults that would get references from this particular time from the ages that they are, but it's still kid friendly. Lucas tried too hard to make the prequel trilogy for fucking kids, and it completely alienated the rest of us.
I mean, to be fair, he started this in Return of the Jedi. His decision to bring in the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi was aiming that at kids, and at this point maybe it's because of the reaction he's got from the youth across the world. But you cannot tell me that when he was making the original Star Wars movie, he was making it aimed solely at kids, because there's nothing that indicates that specifically in that film. And then when you get to Empire, he was quite in a dark place in his life at that point, and that's probably why a lot of the ideas in Empire were quite dark as well. But that's not really a kids movie. In fact, a lot of kids were turned off from Empire Strikes Back. You know, it's much more mature. And even when we talk about
the hero's not in a good place.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite risky.
But even though there is still
a big movie like that where the good guys don't really win at the end, and one of them gets captured, and you find out that the bad guy's the good guy's dad. You know,
and they even did have, again, all ages with the comedy that you get with R2 and the comedy you get with Yoda. And it still manages to hold on to that young adult aged target. Like I said, I don't believe that he always meant it for kids because of 4 and 5.
If he did a bad job of it, actually, because because it's not. There are kids films which my daughter at 5-year-old will watch, and she absolutely loves them. But by the time she's 16, she's going to have a bit of nostalgia for them, but she's not going to watch them and say how great they were. The difference with Star Wars is, and Lucas should see this happening before he ever gets to the prequels, is that we're still debating it. It's still up there in IMDb's, like, you know, for one point for many, many years, Empire Strikes Back sat second, with just The Godfather Part 2 ahead of it for a long, long time. You know, so when people are grown up and critics of a new age are praising Star Wars, you don't then go, yeah, we're going to make a kids film for the prequels, and that's exactly what he did. And then so he tries to be all kid friendly in the first two, while still taking us on the dark journey of Anakin's descent. We get to Revenge of the Sith. Again, massive dialogue issues
throughout, and absolutely
and relationship issues again.
Oh God. Well, let me step back to Attack of the Clones for one second. We're supposed to be this love story, but the first 2 acts is Amidala completely not just turned off by Anakin, but grossed out, like creeped out by him, and then just all of a sudden at the end she's like, all that creepy shit.
So see that's why all the memes, you know what I mean? You see the meme like, you know, I killed all the women and children, and Padma's eyes lighting up, because literally, you know, she's been resistant. She kind of gets lulled into a little kiss in a romantic place, but kind of puts up the walls. And then at the point that Anakin admits that he's committed this genocide, she basically falls in love with him that point on. You know, I know who wrote it, or to the 2 people that wrote it, but I don't know. I do not know what they were thinking with that one. I really don't.
I don't know. No.
And I know that he then got a different writer for Revenge of the Sith, which is a nice segue onto Revenge of the Sith, by the way. The fundamentals were still just didn't work, you know, and a lot of that comes from because you can't have the previous film and then just suddenly make a great film after that either. So it felt like they were trying to, like, for example, the relationship between Anakin and Obi-Wan just doesn't feel like there's any friendship there whatsoever in Clones.
No, because we don't get any of it.
So they try to force it in really quick into Revenge of the Sith, and it doesn't feel right because of that. And you kind of feel, and it's why the Clone Wars, the animated show, is much more celebrated than either of those 3 films, because actually seeing Anakin and Obi-Wan have relationship, you know, have back and forth between them, earned respect for one another. This all happens during the Clone Wars TV series. You know, the minutiae of what's happening in the war, the different sides. This is why people
some of the
love
shit
that
we
so
should have seen in episode 2 and more of in episode 3. But no, you're rushing to get them to turn bad.
Clone Wars for 10 years before they make Revenge of the Sith. You know, there's no way to do that unless you have more in your middle chapter. And Revenge of the Sith suffers greatly because of that. Again, it's got some decent ideas. I don't think the overall scenario works as well as Attack of the Clones. I think it needs a little bit of work, but and in terms of how the Emperor manipulates Anakin, it just seems a little bit too what's the word I'm looking for? It's like, you know, cliched, that it's, I don't even know if that's right, that Anakin goes to save, you know, he sees this vision of Padma dying, and then he turns to the dark side to save her. Kind of wanted more than that. You know? His
hatred of Obi-Wan, Christine was bringing up the other night. Me and her were talking about doing this podcast, and she brought up, she's like, no, something came up in the high ground joke was made, and she goes, you know what's funny is you don't even really understand why they're not as clear as they need to be on why Anakin is so angry and hateful towards Obi-Wan. They loosely connect it to Obi-Wan is the Jedi Order, and Anakin is blaming the Jedi Order and stuff, but his actual, you know, you brought her, you're here to kill me, you're gonna kill her, like all of that stuff is poorly written. It doesn't feel like it doesn't, because their duty feel earned.
You know, their duty would have pushed them into combat anyway, which is why there's far more opportunity there for much more of a verbal spar than a lightsaber battle. I actually think the way to shoot that, when everybody had thought of this great battle, was actually tone that motherfucker down and actually have most of it just the 2 of them talking to each other, and then eventually breaking into something that's actually quite quick and over with, you know, before it even starts, would have been much more. That would have had much more of a lasting impression on me than that.
But then we wouldn't have gotten the greatest lightsaber duel ever.
We
Cam, we wouldn't have gotten 30 seconds of just their faces with blue lights flashing in front of them. We wouldn't have gotten you spin, I spin. We all spin for ice spin, and you wouldn't have gotten parry attack, parry attack, parry attack, parry attack, because we all know that this is Jedi at the height of their ability and training and mastership of the Force, which means they must use the same moves repeatedly again and again and again and again, and they must spin and fucking twirl. Fuck that duel.
Yeah, we are still online, folks. Kel did not take a break down there. That was his actual response to that fight. No, do you know, I agree with you, and I find it, you know, when somebody's a different opinion for you, sometimes you can appreciate, okay, you've got your own opinion, you've backed it up. I just don't get this one when somebody says that's a good fight, and you put the objections to it, and I don't really see any counters that make sense to me. It's a fight can be I'll give you an MCU example. Fight choreography: Daredevil versus Iron Fist. It's night and day. Yep, night and day. And add Jessica Jones on the Iron Fist side as well, because the choreography and that's not good. The fight choreography in Daredevil is actually what sells it. It's gritty, it's realistic, it's always trying to be done in an imaginative way. And this is how you should approach a lightsaber battle. It's about put it in an environment that seems, you know, a different place. Set combatants up that are feeling different about each other. This is how you do it, rather than how can we top the last one. And I think the problem is that everybody loved the lightsaber battle in The Phantom Menace so much, and it is quite good, that they just kept trying to top it after that and being more and more twirly and spectacular. But that worked because it was this very acrobatic sort of Sith Lord with a double-bladed saber having to fight two people at the same time.
Well, even there are a couple weapon spins that I think are even pointless.
Yeah.
But there are a couple times where you can see Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan spinning to put extra force into the hit, extra momentum into the hit. And that actually happens a few times in some of the sequel trilogy duels, lightsaber fights. You'll see Kylo or Rey spin, but they're using it as momentum. Literally, when you watch Revenge of the Sith, they're spinning just to spin. They're not even adding momentum to their hits. No. Sometimes there's not even a hit after the spin, and it's not even a spin to dodge anything. It was literally, people liked those couple of spins in The Phantom Menace. We should do it more.
Yeah. It's excess, and that is the best analogy for the prequel trilogy. It always just excess and really ego. It's George Lucas getting to do absolutely anything he wants and just trying to kind of keep upping the ante, thinking he knew what people wanted, and he started off on the wrong foot and he just kept going with it regardless, because at that point he was like, well, the critics don't like it, it's making money, maybe people just don't want to understand it, and then they'll get it later. Maybe that's just what it is, you know. I'm confident, I don't need the money anyway, so who gives a fuck. And there was just this kind of attitude. He wasn't in the right place, I don't think, to be kind of writing and directing those movies at that time. No. He needed to be kind of setting the outline and hiring really good writers that would have, at that point, before Star Wars had been soiled, would have jumped at the chance. If he had said to Steven Spielberg, will you direct episode 1? Obviously we'll hire a writer, we'll hire one together, here's the rough outline of what needs to happen, I'll produce, obviously, I'll finance under Lucasfilm. Spielberg would have jumped at that chance. He always wanted the chance to direct a Star Wars film, and Lucas knew Spielberg was a better director than he was. He knows that.
Better writer too, probably.
Well, actually, Spielberg's not a writer, but a good director needs to be good with the script in terms of saying this isn't working, and if somebody ad-libs going, actually that works better, there's some skill there in that, but he's not really a writer.
No. I know he doesn't have
he come up with a vague idea in the way that Lucas did for.
Yeah, I didn't mean
Spielberg
writing things the way like Tarantino does. I'm just saying, like in general, as the way you have to be with a director with a script and knowing what works and what doesn't, and when, like you mentioned, ad libs should come in, or when something should change. That is part of writing and writing talent. And I think Spielberg probably has more than Lucas.
Because he's Lucas's friend, he would have the guts to say to Lucas, no, this isn't working, trust me, and they would have been able to kind of compromise or whatever between one another. I'm sure to kind of make it work, because they didn't agree about absolutely everything in the Indiana Jones films either, but they kind of come up with a product which at varying degrees of success, but usually worked,
Well, I'll point this out. The consensus in the fandom is Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars film. There's more than a plurality. I would even wager a majority of people say that Empire is the best.
Yeah.
And it's neither written nor directed by George Lucas.
No, that's true, and I think the way things were left between him and Gary Kurtz didn't help, because Gary Kurtz was one of those people that would tell Lucas no, and he was kind of sadly missed from the prequels as well, but he approached Lawrence Kasdan, who obviously Empire Strikes Back, for the prequel trilogy, and he wasn't interested, and that kind of makes you feel like after Star Wars was a big success that Lucas kind of pissed off a lot of the people that he worked with, so Kasdan didn't want to work with him again, Gary Kurtz didn't want to work with him again, and then suddenly you're making another one, and he thinks, well, we'll just get other people, but getting the right writers is the first thing, page number one, and that's exactly where the prequel trilogy falls down big time for me.
So let's talk about the prequel trilogy in relation to the rest of the saga. Oh, yeah. So I mean, in all honesty, for the story of Darth Vader in the original trilogy, and the story of Rey in the sequel trilogy. Do you really need to see episodes 1, 2, and 3? Do you need them at all?
The way they are, no, you don't have to, because you can leave it as a mystery as to where it started in A New Hope, to be honest, and it worked as one single story before that, even though we always imagined what the background was. So the evidence is there that you don't need it. However, what I think they tried, the bones are there for actually something which I thought could have been really, really good. It could have been up there with the original trilogy, which is a proper dark tragedy of a movie, a romance, but some tragic stuff happening in there as well, and finishing in really quite a sad but hopeful way. But because it didn't do that, no, I mean, you can skip it out if you want, you can watch it if you want, it's up to yourself. I think what's important is we have to think of the original trilogy as being the ultimate canon here, because it came out first in terms of release order, so there are some things in the prequel trilogy which don't kind of line up very well with what happened in the original trilogy. So I think if we're looking at it as an overall 9-part story, then the one that sticks out to me the most is probably the whole Leia remembering her mother thing. Doesn't really match up with what we saw in the prequel, and if I was reading that in a book, by the time I got to that point, which would have been later on, and Leia says, memories, feelings. She was very sad. I'd be thinking to myself,
Yeah.
what are you talking about here? You never met
How
your
the
mum.
fuck
Where
yeah,
did this one come
yeah.
from? That'd be a weird thing at that point. So, it's like little things like that. You think that was a bit irresponsible to not just write. There's some way surely to write round about that. I mean, here's one off the top of my head. I think I used a different one, but what if like you see them like showing a little image of her mum on like a little view screen scanner, and you see the little baby looking up to it, and you think as she grows up, maybe she looks at that type of thing.
Yeah.
Maybe that works, but that's just straight off.
But then
the
it
top
would
of
have
my
been
head.
dangerous for her to have known who her birth mother was, the way that they write the prequels.
Yeah, but they don't say the name though. You would just have the face, as she was young, and maybe they take it away when she's older. You could even have had a line where they say when she gets older, we won't be able to let her look at this, and Bill shakes his head or something. Yeah, I know. But for now, let her try and remember. A little thing like that would have worked.
I still think it would have been smarter to have Amidala secreted away and died in between the films.
There's another option. I
mean, yeah.
I think the only point with that is maybe the plot hole would have been would Anakin, as powerful as he is, really have not been able to sense that, surely
he didn't
sense
Obi-Wan on Tatooine, and he never the entire
I think
Imperial
the connection between him and Obi-Wan is different from the connection between him and Amidala. I mean, if you've got even a good film leading up to that, it should be anyway. I'm not saying it is, but it should be.
Even then, there's a huge plot hole in the fact that Obi-Wan is going by Ben Kenobi, and the Empire would have tracked down any mentions of anybody named Kenobi, and that Luke Skywalker is going by Skywalker himself as well.
Yeah, but I mean, we know that he was Obi-Wan Kenobi, then Ben Kenobi, so they have to keep that. We can't change that. We know Luke Skywalker went by Luke Skywalker, so again, we can't change that. So they've.
I know, but to me, it's just more evidence of the prequel trilogy being pointless and worthless, and actually making plot holes in the OT where originally the plot hole really doesn't matter.
But the fact that it's supposed to be, even if there was a million different fan fictions out there, and we got to pick from the best one that 100,000 people could have come up with, which might have happened if they'd never made them, I don't know. In this day and age, somebody would have, or various different people would have written out sort of episode 1, 2 and 3 even as books or something like that. There has to be some way to resolve these things, So I think as a story writer, if you were given the task of making those 3 films, you don't just go, it shouldn't be done, and walk away. You go, no, that's a challenge, I'm going to try and accept that. But not everything's going to make perfect sense. So they tried to go for the whole side of that he would never go back to Tatooine. There's just no reason for him to ever go back there, and that's why it was such a good place for Luke to hide. And because Kenobi's out the road, nobody really knows, other than the Lars and Luke, that there's this guy Ben Kenobi. The only people that ever mention him by name is Luke, who has obviously met him at some point, and Owen, who clearly has met him at some point.
I guess you can take it that way. I just do you see any threads from the prequel trilogy that are important for the sequel trilogy?
Only Anakin himself. Only Anakin. The relationship between Anakin and Palpatine, and the relationship between Palpatine and the Empire is important, I think, and the Sith and the Jedi, and this kind of good versus evil battle that's kind of going on between them. I think there are some elements there which helps elevate that more into the old trilogy, if done correctly. Again, if you had carte blanche there are ways to enhance that, I believe, within that story. It just wasn't done well.
So if I'm not mistaken, you're actually saying the prequel trilogy is a little bit more important to the sequel trilogy than it is to the original trilogy.
The sequel trilogy? No, sorry, no, I'm not, because
that's not what you were saying. Because here's why I actually think what I just said does make a little bit more sense. In the OT, we don't really hear much about Jedi and Sith. We hear about Jedi, and we hear about Dark Lords, and we hear about the Empire and the Emperor, but the mythology of Jedi and Sith and that history is glossed over in the original trilogy. However, the mythology of Sith and Jedi is a bigger deal in both prequel and sequel trilogy. So I actually think that the prequel trilogy is more important to the sequel trilogy than the prequel trilogy is to the original trilogy.
Well, I mean, I guess, yes, because it's hard to argue when the old trilogy did so well stand on its own. So you've always got that. You've always got that when it was just one self-contained story, it really didn't necessarily need a start or an end. Sorry, that was my mobile phone, which should be in silent, folks. So I get your point on that one. But the idea from making the prequels and then carries on at the sequels is to make one story. So if that's the aim you're going for, or else we just don't have a Skywalker Saga and we stick with the original trilogy, which probably, spoiler alert, is where I'm going to get to at the end, by the way. But, if because it doesn't work, that's because it doesn't work, though. As one continuous story, it doesn't work. I have a self-contained part in the middle, which works really, really well for me. But my own ideas of where that could have went afterwards, and more importantly, because I'm not sure there should have been anywhere they went afterwards. More importantly, what came before it, it doesn't live up to my expectations, but it doesn't seem to live up to really many of anyone's expectations.
No.
You didn't have to be particularly imaginative to come up with a better idea than what they did.
No, as we won't get
and I would at least try
to it.
I would have been sitting there with going, right, what plot holes does this put into the OT? How would I need to try and smooth the edges of that as much as I possibly
even
could.
Simple things like Obi-Wan, I don't ever recall owning a droid, yet he owned two different droids. One we don't know the name of. It was in his Jedi Starfighter, and then
he didn't own them. No. Semantics Jedi don't own.
Yeah, semantics. Yeah. But he doesn't. He would have recognized 3PO and R2. He should have recognized them.
He just didn't need to say at that point that he did.
Yeah, you could, but we know that's not what happened. We know what happened was George Lucas ignored his own fucking story.
If you can at least do that, you can, then the writer, the creator can and say, this, and then whatever they say, that's in canon. You can let little things like that go by. But you've got to remember, they're not doing this like any normal writer does. Because he didn't write the first three films. He had a vague idea of what might have happened before, but that was it. He really started off with kind of.
But he's seen them. He knows what's in them, and before going in, especially if he's going to write.
If you ask any writer to write the middle part of a story and then go back and write the start, do you know what they'll all do? They'll change bits in the middle because they'll have new ideas. They'll have pathways that think this isn't going to link in, so they would go back and then rewrite the middle again to make it fit in with the start. They couldn't do that. When you make a movie, it's out there, it's there forever. You can't do that anymore, and so
I know
you have to forgive them a little bit for that. I think.
I feel he should have watched all three of his original movies off and on throughout his writing of his outline for the prequel trilogy, and I know you can play with some of the semantics and stuff like that, but you and I both know it really just came down to him not either A, not paying attention, or B, not caring.
Yeah, I think that there's probably a little bit of both there. I don't think he felt under enough pressure that he just kind of, he set out to make a film and he made it. You know, like you get that thing with directors say, oh, it's never ready. It's just, it gets to a point when I'm getting to the release date where I go, okay, here's the final cut. Let's just go with it. But you would tinker with it forever. And almost like you think with Lucas, the way he kept tinkering with the originals, he had that passion for them. But that didn't seem to be there with the prequels, because he's changed the... He's even went back and changed the originals again, even since the prequels came out, a little bit more, whereas he's never really touched the prequels as if he sees it as some great vision, because he just seemed to get the script, shoot it, film it, it's a cut, last day, right, okay, off to the guys in the lab, there we go, get in the editing room, this edit works best, and release, you know. And it just felt as if it went through that methodical process. And when you watch the making ofs, you don't get the passion from George at all that he seemed to show when you see the far less detailed stuff from his younger days.
He talks a big game, but doesn't fucking deliver. I don't give two shits about the prequel trilogy. Sorry to the under 30s and Revenge of the Sith.
I wish I did. Because I think there really could have been something good there. But
maybe, but the fact is there's not.
There's not, and so therefore I have no interest in watching them again. And if I'm trying to consume Star Wars for that, whether you call it nostalgic feel, I'll call it that, then I'm not going to be starting with the prequels. That's for sure. No. So let's talk about what we all hold near and dear to our hearts: the original trilogy. 3 films: Star Wars, which would eventually become Star Wars: A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. These 3 films, like I said, have been religious experiences for people, seeing them in theaters starting in 1977, creating a fandom that is as dedicated and as diehard as any fandom there is. I mean, it's this original trilogy that built the hype for the prequel trilogy. It's why the prequel trilogy was so hyped upon, why people camped out for weeks for tickets to go on sale for episode 1 back in the days before. It changed the way cinema works forever.
Mm-hmm.
Because
midnight previews
cinema
and stuff like
would
that
never have been what it is now without Star Wars. That was the one that broke the mold. I know Jaws is always seen as the first summer blockbuster.
Okay. Got it. Yeah, I know.
You know,
I know what you mean.
Realistically, I don't think it was. Jaws was just a phenomenon of its time. I think it was a monster movie, and they're only going to attract so many people, but it was such a well-made monster movie that it just grabbed everyone's attention. But Star Wars and then its sequels were the start of everything that came after, from Goonies, Gremlins, Back to the Future. Just start listing all the stuff that hits in the 80s that we all love to this day. And this was people seeing Star Wars and saying, actually, you can make these fun movies and put a lot of work into them, and they actually make the money back. This is amazing. And it revolutionised cinema from that point on.
And there's no doubt that Lucas, both in the OT and the PT, pushed filmmaking and special effects. Practical effects, of course, hold up generally better than old CGI does, and that's why if you watch the prequel trilogy in HD on a Blu-ray, they look so bad. But the practical effects, while you might be able to see some of the matting or the black boxes around TIE fighters and X-Wings in space battles, and the way they were composed, one on top of each other as far as film cells and picture cells and stuff, they still look better than the dated CGI.
Yeah.
This is I do agree with Jammer here that Lucas did not have all 3 movies 100% planned out. He did not Lord of the Rings this trilogy. He didn't have all 3 and then decide to split them off. I think he probably
he doesn't get enough. But I think there are more links in than people give him credit for.
Yes.
Everybody just says he made up everything one film at a time. And when we went through this in more detail, I've pointed out quite a lot of things, which whether he intended them or not, I read to be connections that
show some links.
And
yes,
that's why I disagree with what Jammer said recently, which we'll get to.
Yeah, I think he fully thought out Star Wars. A New Hope, the original Star Wars, and it is in and of itself a mostly self-contained story. The heroes beat the bad guys at the end. There's a character arc for our hero going from whiny farm boy to superhero using the Force. He doesn't wield the lightsaber really to do anything fancy with it, but you're good to go. If you never make another movie, A New Hope is completely enjoyable on its own. However, I do think Lucas had ideas. Hey, if this movie does well, I can see Luke going and getting some training. I can see the Empire coming back and seriously hammering down on the rebellion. And I can see where I want the rebels to regroup and go one big last push and defeat the Empire, and the good guys would I think he has some general ideas while shooting and writing and directing Star Wars: A New Hope. I'm using the A New Hope title just so that way I can differentiate from just saying Star Wars. Everybody, I know that it was originally just called Star Wars, but I think he does have some ideas. Do you think he had ideas for Empire and Jedi, even though he didn't know names or anything?
I think was that Darth Vader was actually Luke's father, because in the original drafts it was Anakin Starkiller. And there are various drafts where the little things between the Darth Vader role and the Luke Skywalker thing change across. As he's going along. But there's always this, Anakin thing as well. And then the Darth thing, comes into it. And it's, I think Darth, in some ways, a lot of people have said kind of is quite close to the German, or is it Dutch pronunciation for father, or like dad? Or is it Vader? Vader is that's what it is. Sorry, is like
I think it's
Vader. Sorry, yeah. So I'm kind of giving him credit that he maybe thought about these things, little clues in there. But I genuinely believe he always had the idea of Darth Vader being Luke's father. Right from the start, but he had no idea whether he would ever be able to tell that story. So I don't think he was specifically looking to set
things up for that.
But I'd still maintain that I'm not sure whether he told Alec Guinness. I'm not, but I think the way Alec Guinness plays the part in the hut, the look he has in the eyes looks like there's something he's being slightly dishonest with, or he's thinking about how to say it and the way he words it. Whether it worked or not, the way they pull it back in Return of the Jedi makes it work for me anyway. So whether they planned it or not, speech. It doesn't matter, but I genuinely think some of that was planned, but that's a bit as far as I think. I mean, like, for example, I don't think he considered Leia being Luke's sister at that point, at
A New Hope.
People argue he only done it in Return of the Jedi. I personally think he had that idea right from Empire, but I don't think he has that.
You guys should all go listen to the last call episode of for Empire. Excuse me, Empire Strikes Back. Cam, I think you made five points. What was it?
I think it was
as
five
evidence
different points, and you didn't buy really many of them, other than just coincidental. I
think there was two of them that I really said.
Yeah, but it's when you put all of them together,
put them all together. Yes, you make a convincing
case.
I think
you make a too much evidence
case. There is.
That it's not there.
I'm not going to expect Cam to pull them out because you guys don't understand when we did these last call episodes, Cam and I would each have 4 and 5 pages of notes. Our guests, Brian, he was a lot like us. He would have 4 or 5 pages of notes. I don't think Jammer took as many notes as we did for Empire. Maybe he took as many. I think he did for
the Last Jedi, definitely.
For the Last Jedi, though, he wanted to make sure he knew he was coming into a fight.
Yeah. But as I keep pointing out to him, as much as he thinks Empire is overrated, I don't remember him saying one negative thing about Empire Strikes Back the whole time. All three of us were praising all the things. Every time we said something that we love about it, he was like, yeah, that works. That's really good. So I think he needs to go back and listen to that one again because himself, actually, because there's not much opposition he puts up. The only thing he's been saying recently, going to get us into Empire a little bit, is that he doesn't really like the twist. He thinks the twist isn't set up properly, and that kind of links into what we're
the twist
talking
wouldn't
about
have worked today, and I disagree. I still think the twist would have worked today. I think it's one of the best twists in cinema history, and it absolutely works. And whether it was intended or not, when you look back at A New Hope, there are many moments that make that work. You can look at that kind of line and say, he would never have did this if he was Luke's father. I don't think there are any of those moments that that are genuine that you can pick at A New Hope that would say, that makes that seem silly. And that's why I think he always had that idea in the first place. You could even say
you don't need, every twist doesn't need to be like, if you make it like Jim was saying, you should go, I should have seen that coming. But actually, the best twists are ones where you go home and think, I'm going to have to watch A New Hope again. You know what I mean? Before you kind of think, I saw that coming, and then watch Empire Strikes Back again. Where, the bad twists are the ones where you go, why did I not see it? Because I'm one of those people, maybe, I don't know, it's the way, but, when I watch one of these, like, whodunits or something like that, I turn around and say to my wife, this is exactly what happened. Because it's not that you are some detective genius, it's that you can see the writing, you can see the writers going through the writing process and using all the same classic techniques that everybody else does. And if you have a twist that's just that kind of twist, it's not going to sell it to most people because they're just going to see it coming a mile away. You couldn't see that one coming, I don't think.
No, and but you can go back into A New Hope, and whether it was on purpose or not, you can see small things that make you think.
Yeah, maybe it's your mind playing tricks on you, but it doesn't matter because it works, and nobody's ever, other than Jammer, I've heard complaining that the twist doesn't work in Empire Strikes Back. It's just not one of the things that you hear from people. And it is argued by many. Some people think, there's far better twists and, more kind of revered classical movies. And there probably is. But, in terms of the impact that it has on the world in general, that I've seen it,
it's one of the first cases of when you hear the backstory, they tell David Prowse to say, Obi-Wan killed your father. Mm-hmm. And they keep the fact that it's
was Hamill. He was the only one told so that he could react properly.
And then James Earl Jones when he records the line, that's it. And so it's one of those first earliest times that they're pulling
because they had so little people that actually knew it. It wouldn't have come out. You know?
Yeah, and now it's, I mean, that type of security is, I mean, fucking Marvel gives people some of their lines the day they're supposed to shoot, you know, because they're trying to protect these secrets and these twists and things like that. The OT is like you said, it's the only one that's truly self-contained. I don't think the prequel trilogy feels truly self-contained. Yeah, you could say you have the fall of Anakin Skywalker. That's a self-contained story. I don't really think so.
And it never feels like though that's the end at that point, because it's left with the kids. That's the point. You're expecting that these kids are going to grow up and redress the balance. They're not going to leave the story in total darkness. So yeah, you're right. The old trilogy works on its own. The prequel trilogy cannot exist without the old trilogy.
Not at all. And we'll ask ourselves that same question about the sequel trilogy when we get there. But the original trilogy does. It's got a beginning. It's got a middle. It's got an end. Our characters are not in the same positions they are at the end of this. This is one of the things that I can point out, and I'll bitch about Last Jedi right here or right now. Our characters are not in the same positions at the beginning and end of any film of the original trilogy. They move forward in every single movie. The Last Jedi, every character and both organizations, the Resistance and the First Order, are in the same spots they were at the beginning as they are at the end.
Somebody that likes it, if we go back to last year, Jammer would argue that the characters are all in different places now because Kylo Ren's now the supreme leader, and I think I would have to even argue that Kylo Ren's not in the same place as
maybe
Kylo. So,
maybe Kylo.
His character does work. Rey, I'm not so sure. I think there's a little change in Rey, but I'm not seeing. I don't think there's enough there. I don't really see it with Poe.
Is where he's at. Finn is where he was at.
Poe in Revenge of the Sith. There you go. It's because the acronym's so similar.
Yeah.
Rise of Skywalker. Poe doesn't really change that much throughout all three films.
The only difference between Finn is he's awake.
Yeah. I mean, if you
but he's basically the same as he was at the end of before he gets hurt in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
But do you disagree that there's character progression for all of our main characters through each of the OT films?
I think the least character progression of all the leads is Princess Leia. I think I think there was more needed in Return of the Jedi on Leia. I think I'll always argue that point, that she should have been a bigger part of it, not just the damsel in distress of Return of the Jedi. I think, the fact that she was a Skywalker, that they'd made that decision, they needed to lean into that a little bit more. Other than that, yes, I think she's in a very different place in Empire than she was from A New Hope, and but maybe just not so much once you get into Jedi, because she's already, because the end of Empire, she's already head over heels in love with Han, and she's softened a little bit anyway, which is how she progresses over that film. And she kind of starts at that point and ends at that same point in Jedi. But other than that, yes,
okay.
All the characters.
They build some mythology in the original trilogy, dealing with the Jedi. They allude to the things like the Clone Wars. I mean, I don't know about you, but when I was little, I always thought the Clone Wars. I always expected the clones to be the bad guys. Did you?
Of course, but actually, that's an interesting twist to me, and I liked that he did that. Again, it just doesn't work, but I liked that's the kind of Ryan Johnson, if you're listening, that's subverting your expectations in a good way. It's not delivering. If you had subverted
start out as
in
the
that
good
way
guy,
and delivered
guys.
what you could, then because Johnson can pull up some good dialogue. He's a good director. You know how it all fits together. It's just I don't like his story writing. But no, there's. So I like that's like the twist of the. You know, they can never have a Vader Luke moment, like they can in Empire. So to me, the twist of Attack of the Clones, that moment is when you realise, because then you go, the rest's inevitable from there. You go, right, now I see how this all works, how the Empire, it all starts to make sense. So it's like the twist at that point. It doesn't come across like that at all in the movie, but it should have been. You know, again, what could have been? Yeah. Someone remake it someday. Disney, wait till Lucas dies and just remake the fucking prequels. I swear to God, you would make money off that. You would.
No, I don't know. I think you would have more people wanting to remake the sequel trilogy than the prequel trilogy. I'm telling you now, man. I belong to a few Facebook groups, and it's not just the under 30s. There's a lot that were in theater seats in the 70s and 80s that have reverence for. They'll say things like, "Well, at least it's Star Wars." They'll say stuff like that. That's one of the biggest praises I hear, and I don't know what they mean by that. I think
it's like, so if you didn't like the prequels and say the sequel trilogy, well, at least it's Star Wars. What was it that it had space battles, lightsaber fights? Because you had all of that in the prequels as well. So
it's the sequels, yeah.
You know what is it that's so attracting about it? Is it the fact that it doesn't feel as clunky? You know, the prequel trilogy, it feels clunky. The dialogue's horrible. Editing doesn't work. You know. It doesn't feel
the graphics take you out of it these days.
And is it just that it feels proper Star Wars because it feels more gritty? It feels much more a lived-in universe. Yes,
I don't know.
Yes, these are aesthetic things that Lucas actually got wrong with the prequels, and they got right with the sequel trilogy. But does it make it a good story, a good capstone? No, it doesn't, because there's a 9-chapter story. If I'd read that as a book, you know, and it's like a 3-book act, so like Fellowship of the Ring, you know, The Two Towers, Return of the King, and you've got the prequels, the middle, you know, everyone's going to be raving about that middle book, how The Two Towers was so great, but, you know, you're going to look back and go, well, Fellowship of the Ring just didn't really work, and Return of the King just was, well, the story was over by then, so what was the point of making that? I mean, Tolkien even himself considered writing a sequel. He actually started writing a sequel to Lord of the Rings. It was called The Rising Shadow, and he realised after he started writing it, there's no point to this, because I've already, you know, anything would just be a complete come down from where we were before, because, you know, they've destroyed the Dark Lord. So this would be somebody, maybe he thought, because there's no Dark Lord left in his universe at that point, this would be somebody, maybe a human, doing dark things or accessing dark magic, and that would feel much smaller than the tale he had been telling throughout the rest of everything he wrote about Middle-earth. Because that was the whole idea. Everything should be grander at the start, and then it gets a little bit less and less and less as it goes along. It wouldn't have worked, and he thought, well, there's no point in this. This isn't an interesting story. No one wants to read this, and he scrapped the idea completely. And that's what the sequel trilogy feels like to me. It feels like, you know, someone... I've been saying this since... Honestly, I've been saying this since The Force Awakens, before The Last Jedi even coming out, that Snoke to me didn't make sense and had to be explained to me, because it was like someone bringing Sauron back for a sequel of Lord of the Rings and just not explaining it.
That
you know,
several
you can't,
times.
Then all the, you know, the casual fans are going to go, there's a new Dark Lord, because they haven't read all the stuff that goes along with it. They don't understand that's impossible and how it shits and Tolkien's work.
But Cam, it doesn't matter. The mythology, the world building, that's not important.
Yeah, it's only important in the most successful franchises. Why is Warhammer 40k so popular? I mean, it was a tabletop game. Now they're talking about making movies out of it. They've already, you know,
successful
they've got
video games,
videos. They do loads of fan-made stuff. You know, they're doing video games. they're expanding that because people are interested in it. There wasn't actually, and there's loads of authors, right, which I'm told I haven't got into them yet, are really good books on it. But, all that come from a tabletop game because it's such good world building in it.
I can give you a prime example because it's something that I've actually just recently gotten into. I'm into my second book, Battletech. Okay, for those of you that don't know what Battletech is, you've probably heard of the Mech Warrior computer games. Well, that's all based off of a tabletop RPG that went from just pens and papers to miniatures, much like 44K Warhammer. There's these gigantic battles and this huge mythology and stuff like that. And I did this interview with Michael Stackpole, who's very famous for writing the Star Wars X-Wing novels, and you can hear the interview here on the LRM Online Podcast Network as part of our LR Mornings show a few months ago. But you can just Google LR Mornings Mike Stackpole and it'll come right up. It's a two-parter. But he also wrote for Battletech. So I went to some Battletech groups on Facebook to share the interview because I figured, I was in it mostly for the Star Wars stuff, but these guys revere his novels for Battletech. And I asked, I've never read a Battletech. I played like 2 or 3 rounds of old pen and paper Battletech, right? And I didn't really understand any of the history. I don't even remember which clan I belonged to for my games. But I said, what should I start reading? I actually want to give this a shot because I would like to read what Stackpole did. But what do I need to know first? And they were like, well, you need to go to the Grey Death Legion trilogy. And so I did. I read the first book. I'm into the second book, and I can tell you now, BattleTech is equal parts Star Wars, Dune, and Game of Thrones. And the world building is done very nicely in this trilogy as far as setting up the major houses that are in charge of large chunks of interplanetary space. I don't know if this thing spans multiple galaxies or if it's just one galaxy yet. But the mythology is important. Yeah. It matters. The history matters, and you got enough of that. It wasn't as much as we got with the prequel trilogy, which is just dripping with mythology, but lacked the character stuff, and then the sequel trilogy almost seems like a complete opposite. But the OT gives us a taste of mythology, a lot of world building, and good character arcs.
Yep.
It balanced it all.
It's the only one that balances the whole component, I know. And listen, Kev, I tried to contact you in the thing, so I was waiting for a minute till I was jumped in there, so we can go back to that. I need to just go for a pee and grab a drink.
Okay,
I'll only be like 2 minutes.
No problem.
No worries. He's back. Right, I can just kind of like jump straight back.
Yeah, I didn't even think about having Slack up on screen. So we're looking at 1:33.
There never seemed to be much natural point, and I thought, hey,
that's fine.
I'm gonna.
Yeah, but I just mentioned how it balances.
So
balances the three. So we'll go from there.
Yeah. So that's like you've actually hit the nail on the head there, because that's the thing. If you take all the components that make up that original trilogy and why it's so good, and for something to be as elevated and as loved as that original trilogy was, it has to get all its components right, and that does. And the prequel is where they've stripped some of those components out, and those components are characterization, fun. There's a lot of fun. You don't feel the emotion or connection that you kind of felt from the original trilogy. And then when you take the sequel trilogy, it's put some of those back in, but it's managed to push out a few other things. So none of the world building feels as exciting. It doesn't make as much sense. You don't get... And as a result of that, it also loses some emotional impact as well for me because of that, because I'm not feeling anything about those characters going along. Like, the dialogue's snappier, but the way it's put together doesn't put them in situations that are exciting to watch the characters in, if that makes sense. So
no, completely.
Yeah, it's so that's what they are. They are lesser versions of a much greater product themselves. So they've took this classic thing, and both the prequels and the sequels are just basically like fan fiction. I know you can, the prequels can't be fan fiction because Lucas did it. Yeah, but it still wasn't the original team. It wasn't that team that brought the magic together. It was just one component of that team.
Yeah. I will never understand over 30s, especially the 30. Oh God, let's see. So I was 14 when episode 1 came out. So if I'm 35 now, I will say 12 and up. So the 33s and older. I don't get your reverence for the prequel trilogy. I don't, because you're even if you're 12 years old when episode 1 hits, Jar Jar Binks should be annoying to a 12-year-old, because you're starting you're a year maybe into puberty, or you're just starting puberty, so you're definitely into
right. That kind of puberty age kid. I mean, that's the age you kind of you get interested.
You're starting
in
to look
things.
to be an adult.
Yes, your probably primary concern at that point.
And even if Star Wars is still a big deal for you,
if your mates caught you liking Jar Jar Binks, you're going to get the piss ripped at you at high school.
Exactly.
Look at you. You like Jar Jar Binks. You fucking.
You
idiot.
can still you can like the lightsaber battle. You can like the podcast race, but you can't like anything else about it. So for the 33s and older, you guys' reverence for the PT, I don't get.
It depends how people look at it. I have family that are into Star Wars, but is it their favourite films of all time? No. So they look at it and say, the prequels weren't that bad, because they're looking at it as just it was more flashy lights. It was alright. It was fun to watch, but I'm never particularly going to go back.
But they're not looking at it as an entirety.
They got tattoos on their arms and grew up and bought all those fucking books. And when the online started coming out at first, the internet. One of the first places I found to hang out on the internet was Star Wars chat rooms. So I was there for all the kind of prequel spoiler stuff and speculation. And that was a fun part of the prequels, like speculating what was going to happen. And everybody was coming in, like, actually, with all this deep knowledge of the old trilogy and referencing things that, well, if you look at this scene in the old trilogy, they could, and the ideas that were coming out, the twists and turns were you know, they were slowly eroded as we got closer to the end, but you know, they were actually far more impressive at most times than anything that we were actually seeing on the screen. And I think that was the first time fans had really felt that, you know, because up to that point it was like, fans, what do they know? They're not professional writers. And when you look back at some of that content and some of the predictions people had, you're like, these are actually the people that should have been writing this fucking trilogy. You know, it should have been that group, the next group up that loved the originals, that grew up thinking they were the best films ever. That's the kind of people you should have got to write the prequels.
Well, but by the time Lucas starts working on the prequels, you've already had Timothy Zahn and Mike Stackpole and Kevin J. Anderson writing Star Wars books. Mm-hmm. Your
Again,
EU is already
degrees of success, but some of them were really quite weird.
And you've got these characters that have been carried forward from the OT, and new characters completely created in the Thrawn books and the because of Mara Jade, Talon Card, Jorah Siboth, or however you want to pronounce his name. One of the reasons
that I kind of went off the EU was because sometimes there was some bad shit in there, and it went a different. And because everybody had to follow on from what everyone else did, when people took missteps, it affected the rest of the story after that. So after a certain point, you know, I did start to lose interest with it, and I suppose that's.
But there's still with the individual great stories.
Yeah, like up to a certain point, it actually works quite well. It's just that, you know, maybe as some better writers went off and other writers come into it, it didn't always it kind of just kept going downhill a little bit for me. Yeah. Although there was some moments where it peaked back up again, but you know, by that time they had lost me as a fan. At that point, so
you're a terrible person. But anyways, let's get back to the original trilogy. It's hard doing these post-mortems because everything is connected, whether it is essentially connected or not. Like we just talked about, you know, do we need the prequel trilogy to get to the OT? No, not at all. It's completely self-contained. Is that the strength of the original trilogy, Cam? That it is completely self-contained?
It probably is, because it was built without ever knowing whether they would or could ever do the original, you know, three. And even at that point, Lucas had kind of changed his mind on whether it was a 9-part or a 6-part thing. So they, you know, like the Disney people always come out with, and they use that quote where, you know, in the 80s when George Lucas said it was a 9-part. I remember lots of interviews run about the prequel trilogy where he talked about it being a 6-part, you know, thing as well. So I think until he had the idea to do another 3, I'm not sure it existed quite in the same way. And, you know, so yeah, the strength of it is that it does work on its own as one contained story, and you can, which I think I know we're both going to get to, spoiler alert for the end of this, that that we as fans that's what we're going to be left with, is that original trilogy as a standalone piece, because the rest of the components for it don't just meet up to what we want to see in films and what entertains us and what attracted us to the franchise in the first place.
Well, we know that Empire is our favorite. I think you place A New Hope as your second favorite, with Jedi coming in third. I
know you're slightly alternative to that.
Little different. Yep. There's a few emotional scenes and moments in Jedi that I think push it above A New Hope for me.
I agree with you in some sense, because there's some of the best Star Wars content ever is in Return of the Jedi.
Scene.
You know,
the hallway scene in Return of the Jedi.
One of the best scenes in Star Wars, and it's just two people talking in a corridor.
And not just that, but what you mentioned way back at the beginning of this podcast, age brought with with it some scenes or some things that I didn't notice when I was 8 years old watching it on VHS. Age brought me seeing facial reactions. Age brought me. Yeah, I think it's such
tell you everything that's going on in that scene.
Dude,
it's a
Vader crossing his arms on the railing and then slumping.
Yeah. It's just all body language,
little things like that.
It's not even the dialogue, but it's just works so well. And in some ways, we have
so good. And that's the director, man. That's the director and the actors. You know,
because you can write that on paper, but to put it across, especially a guy in a sort of chunky suit like that. I mean, if you just watch A New Hope and then you jump into that scene, you would think, am I watching the same thing here? Because the two characters are in such a different place from where they are in A New Hope. They've grown not just as characters in the story, but the way that they're presenting these characters in the story has grown across those three films as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So my only issue with Jedi, I think, as we've discussed a lot, is it gets a little bit kid friendly for me. The Ewoks don't work for me. I think it becomes silly when you see these arrows moving very slowly and just pinging off stormtrooper armor, and I'm supposed to expect that they've defeated the Empire. I do struggle with that. And I do think Leia got a little bit shortchanged, and Han as a result, because they didn't have much to do together, relationship wise in that movie.
Although I will say this for Han's character, while the execution of his use in the movie is not the best execution, I will say that Han Solo was seen as a great leader, that he was selected to lead the mission on the moon of Endor, the forest moon of Endor, which is a testament to Han Solo's capabilities under pressure.
Proved, even like between A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back, so he's already get the respect to the commander, at the start of Empire, you're a great pilot, Solo. I hate to lose you.
Which makes his portrayal in The Force Awakens complete fucking garbage, and everything about the Solo Star Wars story movie complete fucking
with Solo,
dirt.
I'm with you. With The Force Awakens, I think they had to sell it more as to why I think the idea is that because they've had this tragedy, it's almost like losing a kid, and quite often, I think JJ's looked at that originally and thought, well, quite often when a kid dies, and this is kind of like that, the parents split up, they can't cope with it anymore, so that might be an interesting kind of place to go into this, and I kind of get that, but
it would have redoubled his efforts to be the best pirate there was, though, not be a bumbling idiot.
That's the thing. I think he was too. I think a more sedate Han Solo, troubled by what had happened, whereas it felt like Leia had all the emotional, and Han was like, what you gonna do, kids, huh? Kind of thing. And I mean, Chewie's gone back to steal some Ratars, see you later, Leia. And that's it. It kind of felt all just too neat for that, but I think you could do that, but you really had to tell the story in a different way in order to make
him that
so
distraught.
Well, I don't completely agree with you on The Force Awakens, because I liked some of Han in that. I think again with JJ,
some of Han
he doesn't always show restraint at times. JJ, sometimes he just goes a little bit too far and tries to get another set piece in or another exciting moment in, when the answer is to actually tone it back a little bit and get into the characters. And I think that's a part of anything I've seen of JJ's, that he always just moves away from it. At the time you want to slow down, he speeds things back up again. and it makes for an exciting popcorn film, but not particularly deep, meaningful films that have strong characters in them. I mean, what else has he done that you really kind of think, oh, such strong characters in that?
Star Trek.
Who come across as such a strong character? I mean, I think
he does a great job with Spock in the first two films. I really do. I really enjoy those films.
Not the Spock that everybody knows.
No, but it's the Kelvin timeline. So of course it's not the Spock that you expected. It's not Leonard Nimoy.
But he's far too emotional for a Vulcan.
But what he sees differently, the changes because it is the Kelvin timeline.
It's not that
I like
different.
it.
He's almost in the same place and meets Jim Kirk in almost the same way as he did before. It's not that different for him.
Almost.
And
other than I will agree the scene where he gets into the fight as a kid is wrong for that Spock. The Spock that we get post Vulcan being destroyed, I think works great, and that feeds into Darkness perfectly, and I think his character is fine. I'll agree he's a little too emotional for that one scene as a kid, but I think he's on
it's
spot.
More realistic though, because he is half human and he did struggle with that side of himself.
Maybe
as a kid,
I mean, if you want to say that, so why is he too emotional after his planet's destroyed?
Because Vulcans, he chose the Vulcan way as opposed to the human way, and
his mom's dead, and the planet's gone, and
I mean that's possible, but he's not even. It's not even before that. He doesn't work for me anyway. We're getting on to Star Trek.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough,
we'll have to talk about that on like an LR Mornings episode or something.
I'm more of a TV Star Trek guy. The movies don't. Really
I hate the fucking. So. I hate the original series, and I don't like the original movies. Shatner can go shat himself. Anyways, yeah, we're talking Star Wars, and we're still Jedi, on the OT.
The Jedi, in terms of the moments it has, I've got some of the best moments. There's just a couple of things which drop it down to third for me that could have been better, but for you, they elevate it above A New Hope. That's basically where we stand in the old trilogy. We both agree Empire's the best, and the old trilogy definitely works as a standalone piece, and it has basically all the components in it that make an epic, classic story, and both sides of it are missing pieces
and that
of them.
Perfect balance of character development, world building, and mythology, which is part of world building, but I mean more specifics. Like when I say world building, I'm thinking of the broad strokes of Empire, Rebellion. When I'm talking mythology, Empire I'm thinking Jedi, Clone Wars.
And widened the galaxy, so it made the Star Wars universe a bigger place in Empire, but it also deepened the story. For me, when we get to the prequel trilogy, that's the role of the middle chapter, is to kind of deepen and widen. And I think Attack of the Clones tries to do that, but doesn't do it successfully. But this is one of the issues I have with The Last Jedi, because I'm not sure it either deepens or widens it. Jammer would argue
we'll
the
get
whole,
there soon.
It does.
We're both going to get fired after he listens to this, after bad-mouthing him for 2 hours.
But yeah, when we get to the sequel trilogy, I suppose the problem I had right away when it was announced in 2012 was, how is this possible given
what
how
happens
the
at
first
the end of
six
Return of the
films
Jedi
have went, right? That's a 2-part trilogy. One story across a 2-part trilogy, whatever way you want to look at it. That's the way they designed it. Whether you can say the first part is shit or not, it kind of works.
Let me ask you this: the OT on its own, just on its own with no knowledge of the prequels, no knowledge of anything, just the OT. Is it the story of Luke Skywalker, or is it the story of Anakin to you? I know it's hard to take it all by itself now, given that we have 6 other movies, but to you, is the story about Luke Skywalker fulfilling his destiny to bring his father back to the light, or is it the story about Vader finding his way back to the light? Just the OT. Just the OT.
I don't know, because I'm one of those people that kind of prescribe to the stories about Vader even before the prequels, because and this is how though, and it's hard to take this out of context, you always knew there was an episode 1, 2 and 3. When I was 6 years old and I watched Return of the Jedi, it was still called episode 6, Return of the Jedi. Yeah. So from that point on, I've been
wondering
about how things
Anakin and Vader,
and so in my mind, it was always Anakin's story, even at that point. I think if they had never called it episode 4, 5 and 6, and they'd just been Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, then 1, 2 and 3 kind of thing, then perhaps I would say that, yeah, because it would have been more like the classic, hero rises up in the end and defeats the villain. It would have just kind of had an unusual end. But part of its charm was the fact that it was weird enough that it was episode 4, 5 and 6, and that for a little kid excites the imagination like nothing else, because for all those years playing with the toys, you could decide for yourself what had happened, make up your own story. And when you were a kid, it was shit, and as you got older, your ideas probably got better, as you matured.
The only reason why I ask that is because then that goes back and while you don't need the prequel trilogy because the sequel or the OT is completely standalone, once you decide that this is the story of Anakin Skywalker, now the prequel trilogy, at least the story, not necessarily the movies themselves and the execution of the movies, but the story that's told becomes a little bit more important.
It feels like part of the same story. However, because the OT is self-contained, you do, as we've proved, you don't necessarily need to know the start of that story to enjoy the middle part. But but it is, and we're already, you can see where we're going with the sequel trilogy here because of the way we're talking about it. Even that it, we're establishing that it's Anakin's story, and that's where absolutely you start having a problem to get back to where I come into the sequel trilogy. So to me, right away when they announced that, it was, this is Anakin's story. I don't like the prequels, I love the originals, but this was Anakin's story from start to finish. It was this tragedy redemption, and Luke is the catalyst to doing that. The Emperor's dead, the balance is supposed to be returned because there's no Sith now, so there'll still be evil in the universe, but there'll now be Jedi Knights that can stop people, being so ruthless and things like that. They won't all be extinguished by the Sith who rule everything. And it left it at a way that's not necessarily everybody lives happily ever after. It doesn't necessarily need to be that, but that whatever happened after this would be, going back to Tolkien again, would have been lesser than the big events that had happened before. They could never be as grand as that, because to do that then demeans what you did originally. So if Tolkien had wrote that book and he had made something too much, it would have lessened what Frodo did and what Gandalf did and what all these characters sacrificed in order to kind of win the day in the original story. So it lessens that story as a result. Does that, and that's what this
it's the same points that people brought up when they did the Crimson Empire and Dark Empire Emperor Resurrection story in the EU. You undo the sacrifice of Darth Vader, the redemption of Anakin Skywalker and Luke as like you said, the catalyst. Do you have anything left to say about the original trilogy before we carry on into the sequel trilogy?
But the thing is, in terms of how we're discussing this, in terms of being one story, I've almost exhausted everything I've got to say about the sequel trilogy as well. Because as one story, to me, you just don't write a story like that. You don't have your big climactic moment happen in the middle of a book and then the rest just feels like an epilogue. So if you're going to do it, make it feel like an epilogue. Maybe would have been the way to do that trilogy. But one of the mistakes that they made, I just think they should never have called this episode 7, 8 and 9. See if they'd have said, we're actually going to make our own saga, and it will, but shocker, this will actually tie into some of the old cast. They'll be in it. Originally, they'll help set up the events of the new one. Then you would have had the expectation that it was a carry-on of the same story. They could have took their time with it. They could have said, well, let's not try and... We don't need to make this a trilogy, for example.
They could have
just made movie after movie and been working more like a Marvel format. I'm not saying they had to do that, or they could have done a trilogy but left themselves by this point room to do a second trilogy. They could have had other stories. They wanted more films out. They could have had other films set in that timeline rather than going back to the old timeline. So what happened? That would have been a way to flesh things out. You know what I mean? What happened to Rey specifically in this one movie that's actually in between the trilogy of movies? That would have been, that's an interesting way to start exploring the Star Wars universe, because we can spend a lot more time with what happens in between, etc. So there's ways that they could have done this differently and it wouldn't have had to feel like the finale, but because they were so set on making it 7, 8 and 9, they had to do something which to me made it feel like a proper ending to the overall story. And if it's Anakin's story, then Anakin for me has to be more involved in what happens next. Does that make sense?
And it's not
Anakin is the most non-presence of all. His presence in terms of the influence Vader has on Kylo Ren is there. And that Snoke wants him because of that connection. That even in and of itself is an issue, because Luke would have made sure everyone knew that Vader was redeemed. That would have been one of, just like it was in the EU, that would have been one of Luke's primary teaching points, is that Vader was redeemed. So having Vader be so important to Kylo Ren, having Snoke refer to Kylo Ren as the potential next Vader, to me that's a flawed story point. Well, is it not the idea though of what Vader should have become if he hadn't been idiotically seduced by the light side? And then it's the idea they're trying to go by is that Kylo has been seduced to the dark. He still feels the pull of light the same that his grandfather does, but he's resisting it because he believes that the strength and power and everything that he wants lies in going the other way, not redeeming himself and leaning deeper into it.
I think Snoke should have had Kylo worshipping Palpatine more than Vader. Because Vader is a failure, and you could use the whole you can be the one to begin with. You could be the one to make it past Vader's failure point. You could try to do that, but I don't think it works as well because of what I think Luke himself would have been doing as a teacher. And this is where you're right.
Sorry if
I was going to say that this is where you're right. They started episode 7 at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And Luke's teachings and stuff like this. Luke's teachings is important.
Yeah. If they wanted Luke to be a failure, show us him failing, or show us that there was nothing he could have done to stop it. It was outside influence, and that he's blaming himself, but he shouldn't be. You know, we don't get to have those kind of sympathies with Luke, because all we get is what
we get one fucking moment where he senses darkness in Kylo, and that's enough. That's it
for him to make the decision. I know he doesn't do it, but to consider killing his nephew, and when his instinct was to go against what everybody expected him to do in Jedi and kill his father, you know, but he said no. You know, he was literally prepared to give up his own life rather than kill in anger.
I'm completely fine with an older Luke that is now trained Jedi for a couple of decades,
and
to see Starkiller. I think yes, it would have been better for them to show more of Snoke and Kylo and Kylo's fall, but I have no issue with Luke lighting his lightsaber and then instantly feeling guilty about it, and that moment never bothered me. It still doesn't bother me to this day.
I don't have enough information to understand what got Luke to that point. This perceived darkness in Ben, what was it that was so bad that it pushed Luke to consider that for a moment? If you're going to, this is when Jammer says, "Oh, characters change over the years." Yes, they do, but I have to understand why that character's changed. So if I go back to my Tolkien analogy, if he did write a sequel and Gandalf comes back, and Gandalf's an asshole when he comes back, you know, he's like that, I ain't helping anyone, you know, fuck it, and he just lives in a farm and, you know, smokes weed. You know, the pipe weed, not the illegal stuff, by the way. I mean, Tolkien never get into that stuff. And, you know, and there's no reason for it. If that's whoa, this is shocking, why am I getting this? And then we then learn throughout that story what pushed them to that point. It still wouldn't have worked in the context of that story, but if you've got to do it, that's how you have to try and do it. And I didn't feel that happened enough in the sequel trilogy.
I get that. I agree with you that we start. First off, why are we doing this? The prequels and the original trilogy made it clear that this is an Anakin Skywalker story. That Luke is important. He's a catalyst to it, but it's an Anakin Skywalker story. Anakin Skywalker is dead. He's gone. There's no besides Force ghosting, which should have been Sebastian Shaw not fucking Hayden Christensen, because he was redeemed as an old man, not dead as a young man. Fuck you, George Lucas, for that shit.
I always thought they had done that so that they would have an excuse to have him look differently if they ever did a sequel trilogy. It might have worked if they had brought Christensen back as a Force ghost in some way.
Just because they didn't have Sebastian Shaw to do
it. You can't do that with Sebastian Shaw. It's not going to work. You had to cast someone else.
I still say fuck George Lucas. And to me, that's another example of Lucas not understanding his own story or not caring.
If he had never swapped Christensen in, which I don't think, I agree with you, he shouldn't have done, then I would have simply looked, to me, if I was writing a sequel trilogy and I was thinking who would speak to Luke from the afterlife, the number one person that I would think of as a writer is, and what connects it back to the original story, is it should have been Anakin Skywalker. But I would have recast as somebody that kind of looked like looked like a grown-up Shaw, you know, the kind of thing, like somebody run about the age Shaw was at that point, and you know, that's how
similar
I would
facial
have done it,
features.
You know, because they recast Obi-Wan, you can recast Anakin. It's not a problem. You know, go for it.
And maybe even do some of that fancy facial work. You get permission from Sebastian Shaw's estate. I'm guessing he's dead. I honestly don't know.
I think that's even pushing it further than it needed to be. I think
But you could, is what I'm saying. You could overlay the face if you were going to have Anakin's ghost be a big part.
You don't do it with Sebastian Shaw, who appeared for like 2 minutes, and most of that was in heavy makeup. So he's literally only in that Force Ghost scene at the end. So you just pick somebody that roughly looks like that, and you put them in and say it's Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah, you could do it that way. I was just saying that you have the option for the technology to do the face overlay thing.
Yeah.
If you were going to have Anakin's Force Ghost be a big part.
Just off the top of my head, talking about like the whole Sith and everything like that. If you're saying that the Sith's ended, but darkness can still rise, so let us see darkness rise in a sequel trilogy. Let's have that Luke's training Jedi and Ben does go dark, and he takes several students away with him. And they decide to go and study the dark side, and other Luke's students, are the kind of maybe who has to go against them. You could still have a Rey type character, somebody that appears from nowhere. That could all still happen. Luke could still bugger off and leave the other Jedi where they were to kind of aimless, and by that time Kylo Ren and his cronies have killed them all off, and there could have been history could have all been brought into it. And if you had multiple sort of dark side characters, they could have started exploring some of the issues that caused the ruler to come in the first place.
Multiple characters, like I don't know, the Knights of fucking
Knights
of fucking Ren.
If each of them were villains in their own right and ambitious and like calculating against
fallen
one
students,
another, and maybe some of them followed Ben. He was like the leader, but some were hoping to bump him off and claim the throne for themselves. That kind of intrigue going on in the dark side, that would have worked for me.
Cam, here's a prime example of ignoring things. We know the Knights of Ren exist before Ben's fall, right? Mm-hmm. But we also know that Luke says in The Last Jedi, he says that Ben went off with several of my students and killed the rest of them.
Yep.
So whatever happened to the rest of those
they've actually
fucking students?
Recanonized that now in the Kylo Ren comic. This is the shit I hate. That's explaining all this that should have happened.
Oh, so those students became new Knights of Ren?
No. They're not the Knights of Ren at all. Basically, they all died. But Luke just didn't know that they had all died. Some of them died like trying to stop it happening, and others fell when it all collapsed in itself, which wasn't actually Kylo Ren's fault. It was like an accident that happened, and Luke just assumes that some of his other apprentices had run away with Ben Solo, but they hadn't actually. And then he finds these people that are like the Knights of Ren, and they've got this leader called Ren, and they're just thugs basically, but they try to give them some sort of backstory, and at some point where it's going. Kylo Ren's going to kill this person and take over the group. That's basically what happens.
This is the whole problem, and I will disagree with Jammer forever with this. He's the guy that says, first off, that you don't need a plan. You just got to be able to pivot off of what the last guy did, and in no way did Johnson pivot off of what Abrams did, and Abrams didn't pivot off of what Johnson did. There's a couple of
with the third one.
There's a couple of key things that happen in the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi that shows me that it wasn't anything to do with answering questions. There is a moment in The Force Awakens where Finn and BB-8 escape on the Millennium Falcon. Kylo finds out. He throws a fit, which I like because it shows him to be emotionally unstable and dangerous. And then he says, there's one more thing, my lord. There was a girl. He turns, force grabs the motherfucker, says, what girl? So that to me means immediately that somewhere in or around Jakku, the First Order and or Kylo Ren and or Snoke are tracking an important person, a girl of some importance that was lost on or around Jakku. And
this is where, actually, if they had always had the plan to bring Palpatine back, and that Rian Johnson knew that when he was making his film, that he could start putting those kind of connections together, possibly.
Yeah.
But
and I thought
Rian Johnson makes his film with no idea that they are bringing Palpatine back. He has
none.
No clue. There's nobody's going to tell me that was ever mentioned to Rian Johnson, that actually Palpatine.
Ian McDermott admits to
he got phoned the first time a year and a half ago, roughly. Mm-hmm. Clearly, we know from what Trevorrow said. His script's basically out there now. There was mention of Palpatine, but he wasn't back at all. So Abrams
and Kylo was going to stay bad and die bad
at that point. And then Kennedy says, like, "Oh, we always talked about it." Maybe they talked about it, but they never said, "Well, let's go towards that way." That's what they needed to do. Well, let's do it then. Because
and Driver says he's known since the beginning where his character was going to be at, but you look at Trevorrow's script
at the end. But yeah, Trevorrow's script doesn't redeem him. It goes, but it follows on from where, right, this is what I mean about The Last Jedi. Yes, somebody could say, it went in an interesting direction because it went against that. But if you don't have a plan in place, this is where it starts to make sense. So one director comes in with the idea of redeeming Ben Solo. The next director comes in and says, we're going to kill the bad guy, we're not going to redeem Ben Solo, and we're going to make him the bad guy. Then the next director goes, okay, well, that's the way you're going with it. I'll lead this up with the obvious conclusion, which is Rey versus Kylo Ren, and, Rey wins in the end. Basically, that's it. And then he gets sacked for that, and J.J. Abrams comes in and goes, fuck it, we'll bring back Palpatine, and that'll be a reason because we've got no other way to redeem Ben Solo unless we bring in another villain, and clearly Rian Johnson killed off my villain. I don't want to go the way Johnson went, so I'm going to go back the way I was going to go originally, and we'll just write some quick story in that'll explain this, so you end up with this crammed full of fucking nonsense and maps.
There were four things
to the moon and
back. To me, there were four things that Rian Johnson had to have answers for, because the middle chapter needs to answer these questions.
The stuff that starts in the first one gets deepened in the second one. That's
right.
How
so why is Luke where he is and doing what he's doing?
Yep.
Who is Rey? And Brian Brantley, who's a frequent guest co-host on LR Mornings with me, mostly on Mondays, been part of our last call podcast. Verified this. He and I had conversations about Rey being a Palpatine in 2015 after watching The Force Awakens. I thought that would have been an interesting story element.
One of those theories that came out there. I personally didn't like that idea.
I liked it better than her being a Skywalker or a fucking Kenobi.
I kind of like the idea of her being a no one more.
I was okay with that too.
An issue with that.
I was completely okay with that.
You need to dive into that deep,
but you need to know why she's so powerful.
So you need to then get back into, for me, the whole chosen one thing again, and you know that because the darkness is rise, the light has done what it did the last time. This is what Anakin was created for, and it's created me this time because the darkness has risen again, and it's because
it's cyclic.
Luke's given up.
That makes fine sense.
Luke gives up, and the Force goes, well, I've got no one else now, and it hits Rey. I would have. That would have worked for me, you know what I mean? It was because Luke had given up. And Luke realized when he comes back to the Force, this all comes to Luke, and he realizes and he understands it all, that his place in the universe, he was the one that was supposed to stop this from happening, and continue to train new Jedi's to do the same thing. And because he's not done that, the balances went back out again, you know, and it ties it back. It doesn't demean what Vader did, because Vader still released balance.
Did his job.
You then have a sequel trilogy that is about the importance of why the Jedi need to be there to stop it happening again,
and keep
that should have been the
balance
answer.
in check.
So, you know, the first one's tragedy and what happens if you don't have the Jedi. The second one's then the redemption, Jedi coming back and restoring balance, and then the third one is about how to maintain that balance. And the only way to maintain the balance is to maintain the Jedi Order and keep the Sith down. And that's the angle that
even
I would
changing
have
some of the Jedi Order ways of, you know, no loving, no marriage type stuff.
Definitely, because they didn't
addressed.
work, and that's the kind of stuff that they should have been exploring in the sequel trilogy, because that was so hinted at, and in the way that, you know, the prequel trilogy, I think George Lucas was trying to say, and he, you know, in interviews he said the Jedi were too dogmatic, you know, they weren't.
Yeah, and and also how political they had become too.
But you know, and that should have been the story. Should have been how the Jedi need to evolve going forward, and Luke should have been leading that. Even if he failure's fine, but you know, that should have been the way they went with it. To then connect it back to family ties in Palpatine is, to me, I mean, I don't know, listeners, you know, MD listen to this, let me know, does this sound better? It's all connected to Palpatine in the end, and the relationship between the Palpatine and the Skywalkers, or like the first six went, it's all about the balance of the Force and the importance between the Jedi and the Sith and how they affect what goes on in the galaxy. Just write in the comments, let us know which is better, because that's just some guy working on a podcast that can come up with that, and then you get this multi-million-pound director J.J. Abrams, and his idea is, no, we'll go back to Palpatine, you know, and you keep having these images. You just show, like, whenever somebody says, hey, why did the Death Star wreckage appear as, how did Palpatine survive, and they just show that gif of the Death Star just imploding at the end of Return of the Jedi. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous to think big sections of that managed to survive and not create a nuclear winter on the planet they landed in. And not
just survive, but it gets blown to other moons in the system of instead of the moon that it was orbiting.
Imagine something the size of that thing hurtling into the planet at, you know,
I can suspend some of my belief for that, I guess. But here's the rest of those four things that needed to be continued on from 7 to 8. Where's Luke? What is he doing? Who is Rey? I thought it would have been cool for her to be a Palpatine, but not bringing Palpatine back, because I always thought it would be really nice for her to become the bad guy and Kylo to be redeemed and he kills her. But you'll never ever convince me otherwise that there's not a bit of an SJW agenda from Kathleen Kennedy, and the female always had to be the good guy and was always going to remain the good guy despite having bad guy blood.
I liked your idea about The Last Jedi, switching them round and having that the twist, that one starts going bad and the other one in response to that realizes
exactly
that there's no one else to stop
and having her be a Palpatine is a potential way for that to happen, but also having her be a nobody is still fine. She gets power hungry and says, no, I know better. So but you got to explain at least why Rey is so powerful, whether it's the Force created her or some sort of lineage. Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren, because you fucking made them seem super fucking important. And the biggest flaw out of the entire sequel trilogy is the world building. The why is the Republic so weak? Why is the First Order so strong? And why is the Resistance the only people standing against them?
Nothing at all. Well,
exactly.
The Hosnian system blew up, and they just sat and said, well, you know, we used to run the entire galaxy, but I guess we'll just wait for the First Order to arrive now. You know, and we don't have any ships. You know what? It's this entire
We surround all of our
city,
ships around our capital that's not Coruscant.
It's an industrialized planet with people, planets will have their own defense forces. They would start to fight back. The Clone Wars had devastated all of that. It doesn't make sense for the First Order to just come in and take all that one blast from a Starkiller base.
Episode 8, quote unquote, according to Jammer, answered only two of those questions, and apparently the other two aren't important. Who Snoke is doesn't matter. We killed him
because we didn't know who the Emperor was when we saw the old trilogy, apparently. So.
And that's okay if you have somebody step up and remain the big bad guy, but you redeem Kylo Ren.
When Star Wars Return of the Jedi came out, it was called Episode 6 Return of the Jedi. This is supposed to be the end.
Yes. So but they answer Snoke by killing him and saying he doesn't matter. Okay, got it. If Kylo Ren remained the big bad guy, like Trevorrow's script, I accept that killing of Snoke better without a backstory, because I did agree. I've pointed that out before. We did not have an Emperor backstory with the OT. And then the only other question, raised parents are nobodies, which again, okay with, but if you explain why she's so fucking powerful in the Force. But Johnson didn't do any of that. He doesn't, and he doesn't really even give us a real excuse for Luke. He says Luke had a bad day, and that's why Luke is where he's at. But he doesn't go any further. There's no more explanation.
How did it make Luke fundamentally change everything he thought about the Force at that
everything
point? You know, this has destroyed everything about him. He's shut himself off the Force. He doesn't have any contact with his sister, who he's left out there on her own, knowing what's happened to her son.
Here's about how bad things are getting, flashback. And says no, I'm not going to come and help. Well, what is so? Yep. It's here's the thing, man, and we're gonna come wrap up. After the Rise of Skywalker attempted to connect to things that were mentioned in episode 7, J.J. Abrams tries to answer those things, but he still fucks some of them up.
You couldn't do it at that point. It was too late by then.
No, you can't. And especially deciding to redeem Kylo Ren again, you basically negate the Last Jedi. The Last Jedi is actually a completely unnecessary film, because other than the fact that Luke Skywalker dies.
Yeah, that's really the only bit you could the only thing that would concern you is if you went straight through The Force Awakens to The Rise of Skywalker would be what the fuck happened to Luke Skywalker?
What? That's it.
That's the only question you would have. And what happened to
But
Snoke?
We know that he's missing in. We know that he's missing in the opening of The Force Awakens.
Yeah, but it ends with them meeting up.
It ends with, if you cut that scene out, she goes to.
It could go anywhere.
Yeah, you cut that scene out of her handing him the thing, then you find out that Luke is dead, and Leia is training Rey, and Palpatine is back, and the very beginning of Rise of Skywalker tells us what happened to Snoke. I killed Snoke. Boy, I made Snoke. Like that's the dude. The Rise of Skywalker completely negates
but it kind
the
of
Last
shows you
Jedi.
how the Rise of the Skywalker, without having the finality of it, but actually where it kind of maybe begins, might have been a better second part. It might have been a better sequel to The Force Awakens and what we got with The Last Jedi, but just not then rushing through to the end and actually getting into the Palpatine thing. Imagine the start of the next start. Imagine we were waiting for The Last Jedi to come up, none of us know what's going on, and the first scene was Kylo Ren arriving at Exegol, and you seeing Palpatine still back, and you think, okay, I still would, I'd be like, "Ugh," all the same issues I had, but you've now got more time to maybe get into why it's possible, because you've got 2 movies now to go, and now you're back to that connection of, right, okay, this could feel like the end to this story finally, you know what I mean? There seems to be something built up then, and then this fleet that appears from nowhere, well, that could conquer a galaxy, that fleet, couldn't it? You know what I mean? So you can start to see why the good guys would be in the back foot, and, they mobilise, and, you're setting up for a big war. And in the place of all that, you've still got where's Luke Skywalker, and what's going on with Rey, and, all this sort of stuff still to discover.
Yeah.
It could work, it could work. With a bit of editing, you could just jump from one to another. You took out that final scene. It
could. The bad thing is that nobody decided to follow up what the other person set up.
No, I said when we say that,
Jammer and Nick and others can.
That the Rise of Skywalker is really good because it.
Not by any means.
Because you have to consider that the middle one was there, and it doesn't follow on from it at all.
I think Trevorrow's script feels incredibly independent, just like the Rise of Skywalker feels independent. But at least it carries on more from the from the Last Jedi than Rise of Skywalker does.
One of the things I liked for his script was the way they explained. They didn't. I don't know how he explained Snoke actually. Now that I think about it, but. Because we only get tidbits, nobody's released the actual script, but the whole Kylo Ren going to find this ancient Sith master and him saying that basically insinuating Darth Plagueis was made up, that actually, that Palpatine has been an unreliable narrator at that point to Anakin, which is absolutely, you could read that scene many, many ways. It's actually one of the best scenes in the prequel trilogy, the Darth Plagueis scene. Because you don't know if Palpatine is even saying the slightest bit of truth in it at all. And, to actually turn all that on its head a little bit. But, one of the reasons they maybe can't do that is because, and one of the reasons that maybe they didn't like Trevorrow's script, because that would affect stuff, because Darth Plagueis is in canon, isn't he, elsewhere? So that would affect that.
Maybe, but then again, you're talking about narration and the way somebody talks about somebody. It still leaves some wiggle room.
Still, anyway,
it's a
more interesting idea.
All of it comes down to this though. You have to have an outline and a plan.
Yeah.
Lucas had ideas. Were they completely set in stone? No, but I think at the end of A New Hope, he's in the editing room. I think he has more of an idea of what Empire and Jedi will be than Kathleen Kennedy had at the editing room of Force Awakens. What The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker would be. Yeah. And I think Lucas had more of a plan than she did.
He must have a good idea of where he's going in Return of the Jedi by that point.
Definitely.
And you can't say that about The Last Jedi. He doesn't have an idea. And arguably you can say that for the prequels, because we knew where Revenge of the Sith was going from the second one, because it only had one place to go. But they didn't have any idea where to go next after. They just let Rian Johnson make a movie. They kind of liked some of the beats that it did because it was a little bit different. They thought maybe this will be like,
and there is some cool stuff in it.
This will be the Empire of the new trilogy, and everybody will like it because it's a little bit different. But then they had no plan how to follow it, and then when the fans start pointing out all of this stuff and why it doesn't work, they shit themselves. They decide
and overcorrect.
They're sacking Colin Trevorrow because what he's produced, it's not going to be Star Warsy enough, and they think, who gave us the stuff that was most like the original trilogy? Fans said it was good to be back to Star Wars again. Let's get J.J. Abrams back. And Abrams came in and goes, well, Well, we remade A New Hope.
Let me remake
and that
Return
worked,
of the Jedi.
We're remaking Return of the Jedi. And of course, I'll change enough things so that they can't say I plagiarised George Lucas. But, but we're basically making Return of the Jedi, so let's get to that. But we're going to have to
villain
add
gets
all
redeemed.
this
Lando
shit
leads
in
a
order
fight
to
in
get
the
to
Millennium
that point.
Falcon.
And they're so determined to get to that point that the Last Jedi doesn't go any of these places, that they then have to cram all this fucking story into the middle, zipping across the place with no time to slow down at all, because they have to hit that end point that they want to hit, which they've decided is going to be the end.
You know what's crazy is all three of these movies take place within a year.
Yeah. There's no time, you know.
A year and maybe a couple of months.
And that is all in Abrams. That's not even in Johnson. That is J.J. Abrams. He decided
because of the way he ended Force Awakens,
which is a stupid. It was a really powerful kind of ending in terms of how it all looked. Aesthetically, it was quite nice. But when you look back at it in hindsight, it really does hinder. And I would have had to think of an inventive way to start the next movie to get round about that. Thought of a couple, but this isn't the time or place for that. And then J.J. Abrams takes over again and says a year has passed since what happened, and there's supposed to be a slight change in everybody's relationship, and then it just kicks off at 100 mile an hour, and there isn't any time for characters to, like they talk about romance or.
And we add characters. They add characters. Like, what the fuck?
And they just bring people in that don't have, we don't care about, and we don't get time to care about. I mean, that Zori, she just comes in, doesn't even take her fucking helmet off. Just comes in, flops it up, appears at various convenient points to advance the plot along, and then is there in the final battle at the end, and we're supposed to care about her. Well, he did the same thing with Captain Phasma, so I don't know why we should be surprised.
A director she was a big waste.
Made Captain Phasma. How should he have been the person that got to make the final one of the trilogy? You know what I mean? They just copied the original trilogy, made the same story again, and all it does is shit in what happened in the old trilogy.
Yeah.
It's just toilet to me.
Just on Phasma, I walked out of Force Awakens like she didn't even put up a fight. They said turn down the shields and she did it. She doesn't even put up a fight at all. Everybody made a big deal. Gwendolyn Christie,
imagine that happening in a gritty, realistic war film where like they go into a bunker and they're lap press, give us the codes. And the person's like, no, and they jump up and have to shoot them or something like that because they refuse to give in because they're that passionate about their side. And you, a military man, do you just go...
And the First Order doesn't...
At that point, if you believe in it.
She just cost the First Order Starkiller base, and they don't punish her. She remains in charge of stormtroopers.
One would assume she never let on. How did they put the shields down? I've absolutely no idea. I get trapped, and I'm sure the security camera footage will back up what happened. Well, the planet's been destroyed. We don't have the security camera footage. Really? Oh, damn it! Then I don't know what happened. So I'm sure she could have found her way at it. That'd have been an interesting Disney Plus comedy series.
Here's
the various lies of Captain Phasma.
here's the God's honest truth about Star Wars sequel trilogy. Toys, merchandise. Disney saw the merchandising from the prequels and the revitalization of the OT there in the late 90s. And that's what Disney wanted. They wanted that merchandise money. That's it. That's the only reason they made movies.
I don't know. Like any other franchise movie now, it's not special anymore. I think that's gone now.
But
because I
don't agree.
You're still always of those originals, but as a brand now, You know, that's my only association left is with those original trilogies. I've got no interest in anything else.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought you, I thought you were saying all brands and franchises are just for toys.
No, I'm saying
okay.
like if you look at the MCU, for example, right, it's taking the same idea. It wants merch. It wants big box office. You know. It's a formula, but it's a machine, you know, it punts it out. But at the heart of all that, Kevin Feige knows that you need good story, that you need emotional beats, you need to connect with the characters. Sometimes you don't need to do what the fans want, but sometimes you do, and when you do what they want, it has to feel a little bit special. These are you know, you hear him talking, and I write news about Kevin Feige probably every time he says something these days. So you know, I've watched, you know, his New York Film Academy interview and everything like that, and this is the way he talks about it. He actually gets it that yes, this is a big money making machine, but if you make bad stories, people stop coming to see it, and the money goes down. And you stop making money. You need the story has to come first. Yeah. And this is, in my opinion, something that Kennedy has not taken forward. So it's she's went into it like, this is a big money making machine. I know how to make movies, so we'll do this, we'll do that. I'll hire you, you'll make this movie, and I'll hire him, he'll make that movie. And she didn't have somebody saying, no, this is Star Wars, you know, this has to be treated with a bit of care and attention, because
she had nine directors for 5 films.
Time. George Lucas really made an arse of this, and at this point you have to get it right. Because if you get it right, Star Wars is back and it's as big as the MCU. See if you get it wrong, it's a lower tier now. And I think, sadly, that's where we are. Star Wars is now lower tier than the MCU in the casual audience's eyes. And the box office so far is showing that. The Chinese just don't take to Star Wars at all.
No. Well, we talked about the prequel trilogy kind of sort of being more important to the sequel than the original trilogy. The original trilogy's importance to the sequel trilogy. I mean, because you've got Luke, Han, and Leia. but the sequel trilogy, is it a standalone story? Can it stand by itself? No, not at all.
No, not especially the way they ended it with bringing Palpatine back. I think that made it. You know, maybe if they had done the third one in a different way, you could have said, okay, maybe this could stand as its own thing. It's still too similar to the old one, but it could have stood on its own if it had a different ending.
I hated that too so bad, and I called it
the same ending.
I called it, and Jam were telling me maybe not. I fucking called it. I was like, we're gonna get, and what upsets me is when Jammer disagrees with you and I that they copied Empire Strikes Back for the Last Jedi. It's just uprooted, like you said. It's inverted.
Put his finger in the floor and lick it is basically there to tell the audience it's not snow this time. it's actually salt, you know, and it's become a metaphor for how the fans feel about it. Salty.
You
know,
the sequel trilogy.
It's been shit, but shit in a different way from how shit the prequel trilogy was. That's the silly thing, because the prequel trilogy is execution. It's like it's made by people that don't know how to make movies. That's how it feels like fan fiction. The opposite is there of the sequel trilogy. It feels like fan fiction, but made by a really big budget by people who actually know how to get actors to perform and make good shots and that. Because there's some great action sequences in the sequel trilogy,
and there's some decent dialogue and good moments.
Like, you know, the moment when Kylo's redeemed and he has the little shrug before he fights the Knights of it. There's some nice touches in it at times.
Yeah. But I like
connective tissue.
Let's do it. Let's have this fight.
Yeah. the connective tissue isn't there that brings it all together. You know,
it's so sporadic.
Yeah.
So let me ask this: has the sequel trilogy raised or lowered the prequel trilogy in your mind at all, or does it remain where it does?
It doesn't affect it at all.
Okay.
Really. I think it would have been an impressive task if it somehow elevated, if somehow things had linked back to that and it elevated it slightly. That would have been, I don't know.
That would have been most impressive.
Most impressive. But
I'm along with you. It does nothing for me for the prequel trilogy.
No.
It still sets at the very, very, very bottom of my order of favorite films.
Surely you're going to ask next is, what does it do to the original trilogy?
What? So there you go. What does the sequel trilogy do for the OT for you?
It really demeans it. I'm not going to say it destroys it. J.J. Abrams raped my childhood, or any of these kind of sound bites or anything
cliched
like that.
sayings.
Because how you perceive something is how you choose to perceive it. So I can still look at the old trilogy and like it without having to admit that what happened afterwards is canon. That's the choices you can make. You can choose to not believe the truth
because it's a wholly independent story.
Because it's an independent story, but it really does demean the old trilogy. Nothing seems as important that happened in that old trilogy anymore, because of the events that happen in the sequel trilogy.
Because of the execution of the events. Yeah.
That right back in 2012 when I thought, can they actually do this? This is what I worried about. What they'll do is they'll make something which just makes the originals worse. And unfortunately, sitting here now in hindsight after it's completed, that is my professional opinion, I suppose. I agree that it does not help it helps the OT by basically making me only want to ever watch the OT. But there's moments in the sequel trilogy, especially in the Rise of Skywalker, and some moments of Last Jedi that I do think demean what happened, Luke's arc and Vader's arc in the original trilogy. I don't know if it completely, like you said, I'm not going to say, it ruined my childhood any more than the prequel trilogy ruined my childhood. Hell, I was still in my childhood when the prequel trilogy came out. It doesn't, because you still, what you loved is what you loved, and it's the same reason you loved it.
There's no enhancement, but that's
just
for
that
fucking
the next
sure.
part of it you don't love the same.
This is what I think. I agree with you. We should have never had a 7, 8, 9. We should have had Star Wars: The First Order, and then Star Wars: The something, and then Star Wars: The something, and done what it seems like this Project Luminous will be, an MCU style Star Wars universe.
But they rushed, and they want,
because
what
they
wanted
saw
to
that
do
money
was,
and toys, and they thought that's the way it was to go.
7, 8, and 9, it'll excite people. If we say we're bringing back the original cast, it will excite people.
Yep.
We're only giving you till 2015 to develop a sequel to the Star Wars trilogy and make it work. So they never bothered about what would happen in 8 or 9. They just got that first one out, and then they thought, right, how do we do the next one? And they never planned it. They never gave themselves enough time. They rushed into it. And they made a lot of mistakes in their purchase.
There was potential. Yeah, I think we can agree on that, right?
The films weren't fantastic. I mean, Rogue One's okay because it doesn't. It's got some good battles in it. It's not particularly that much of an interesting film, right? There's not really any interesting characters in it, but it doesn't shit on anything in the old trilogy. It's actually like a kind of fun, fan servicey little nod to everything that sets up in a New Hope.
And it's got great action scenes. Some of the best Star Wars action scenes.
Good, they feel kind of grounded, realistic. They feel like the old trilogy, and it's the first time we've kind of had that, really, right, at that point. But it's still not fantastic. But Solo was pants. I think really the three films have been pretty pants. The actual sequel trilogy itself. So what have they produced that I've liked so far? We're looking at 6 out of the 8 Mandalorian episodes. Is what I've kind of really been interested in so far in terms of the entirety of Disney's output since 2012.
That's wow. And I've actually now seen the Mandalorian twice, the entire series twice. I watched it with my father over one whole day. We watched it when I was traveling to get my.
You must have been surely
kitty.
In the middle. You must have been like, if you had seen this, I would be skipping my head at this point.
No, for
the episode with the untechnological, the not very tech people, where the bounty hunter comes and finds the kids, and we meet Cara Dune for the first time.
Oh,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
I think it's the one with the.
I'm not
bounty
disagreeing
hunter guy
that there's
the
filler episodes that we didn't need. But what I liked about watching it with my dad is he's a big old Western fan, and not just Westerns, but action movies, Westerns, and there was times where he would turn around and he'd be like, "Oh, this is from this movie.
Yeah,
this is from that movie,"
well. Yeah,
and he even got things like, oh, this is Alien right here. This whole red hallway scene being this is Alien. Like I got a lot of enjoyment out of watching that with my dad.
Yeah, there was actually some
way.
alien influence in that episode, I think, in terms of the way they tried to shoot it and the claustrophobic nature of it. So they did like lean into another, but it is mostly kind of Western. But there was some episodes where they kind of went away from that vibe, and that was one where they kind of went definitely where it felt sci-fi. That episode more than any of the rest of them, and it's why as a filler episode, I actually still enjoyed that. I actually still enjoyed it because it was like a little variation off the slant and then back onto things again. But the one that was based in Magnificent Seven, I just didn't enjoy it. They were just plastic people. All those people in the background, there was nothing to make us care about them other than the fact that these people are suffering a bad time, and I'm the goodie, and I'm going to help them. And I thought right away at that point, maybe it was too quick for the El Mando, to be that good. To have went that way, because he's just after
maybe
changing the ways. It's too much a turn too quick for me. And I didn't like the Cara Dune character in that one, but I thought she was fine when she came back later on for the end. I thought she was fine. So
I'll say this: my second time watching it, I actually enjoyed it a little bit more, and maybe that's because I was watching it with my dad and him getting those references.
We should really be doing. That's what we should be doing next. Another last call on the Mandalorian, probably. And just
ladies and gentlemen, let us know. Actually, we need to know what you guys want us to do with Last Call going
we
forward.
Could, for example, do stuff with the Clone Wars, which I've never actually watched them all, and I know that's
never watched all
Disney
of them
Plus
at all.
The new series as well. Maybe that's something we could. Yeah. Are you planning to catch up on that in Disney Plus?
We can talk reviews of things like that. We can talk future Star Wars movie news. Just let us know in the comments below what you would like to see from Last Call. I do got this question for you. Heading back to the sequel trilogy real quick. Do you think Disney, knowing how little they have let the novels actually do you think Disney lets the adventures of Rey continue in comic or novel form?
I think they understand how restrictive that could be for potential future plans. I think they would hope one day to maybe look at some of those characters again themselves, and go into the future and explore the legacy of those characters. And until they get to that point, I don't think they'll want to kind of pigeonhole themselves
So
in a
you
certain
think
direction.
basically,
So I think that's why they're going into the past. Just leave this where it is at the moment, and then they can pivot back to that at some point in the future, because Star Wars is always going to be owned by Disney, and guarantee in 30 years' time they will be pumping out Star Wars films still. So, you know,
not if they keep fucking shit up.
As long as they make profit. As long as they make a profit off it,
that's true.
Them, even if the budget's reduced.
Sony is that way.
People eventually, and they'll replace it with people that will get the job done. And if they make better films, Star Wars will become successful again, because good stories bring in audiences.
We'll see what happens in 2021 when Kathleen Kennedy. She will not get a contract renewal. She won't.
No, I'm actually going to be writing about that this week.
Do you want to give a preview?
I think there's a lot of people calling for, since the Obi-Wan news came out, there's a lot of people calling for Kathleen Kennedy's head, as this is the latest thing. I actually think this is probably the most sensible thing she's ever done since she got in charge. So at this point, I'm actually going to be
but do you trust her opinion on scripts?
No, not at all. But that's not a confirmed report that it's 100%.
That's true.
If Kevin Feige had said, actually, I want somebody else to take a look at the scripts, what can it hurt to have somebody else take a pass and see if we can make them better? Everybody'd say that's smart. That's
nobody
what Feige does.
Nobody would bat an eye at that.
If she suspects that something might not be right, especially because I think Obi-Wan's an important one, because he's such a loved character, and they're bringing McGregor back. It's the one chance they've got to do it, because after that it'll be too old. So they've got to do it in the next 5 to 6 years. That's the kind of window for getting an Obi-Wan thing out there, and I think they need to get it right. So on that respect, I think she's wise in this instance, if she doesn't feel happy with it, to just get somebody to make another pass and see if they can make it even better. I don't have an issue with that. However, I think looking at her tenure as a whole, this is the first wise decision that she's made amongst many poor decisions. And I don't necessarily blame her for all of them, because I think Bob Iger has to take some blame as well. I mean, it's him that decides when stuff. It may have been him that. Well, apparently it was him that pushed for not when want the first Star Wars film, The Force Awakens, out in 2015, whereas Abrams wanted to actually delay it a little bit because he came in quite late to that one as well. And then they were throwing out all Lucas's stuff and starting again, which Disney weren't maybe imagining to do at that point, or maybe they were. I don't know.
I can tell you personally, I'm thankful we're not visiting the fucking microscopic world of the midichlorians. So I had no problem tossing George Lucas's shit out the window.
One little point there, and Lucas is the type that probably would mention the most subjective point in terms of like, oh, this will really get the fans in a twist when I mention this one. I can actually imagine him doing that, and it maybe not being quite as bad as that, but I don't know. I'd love to be able to read what his vague outline was one day, just to kind of see how bad it was, or if you could say, well, yeah, Disney, I can understand why you left this, or whether you could go, actually, I could use that. I could create a story with that outline, I would love to know that, and I don't think we ever will. But yeah, ultimately, Disney had a chance to do something a lot better, and I think Bob Iger, for profits, because that's what he's there to do, make the company profits, was solid on a 2015 date. They didn't have enough planning in place from buying it to going ahead. Just a couple of years really was all they had, and they did end up rushing it. But I think from that point on, I think it was Kennedy that picks J.J. Abrams. I thought he was the wrong choice right for the start, because I've never liked any of his work. Never. Nothing. The only thing I liked was like the first season of Lost, which he was a little bit involved in. Even Alias, which I liked maybe the first season. I realised that all he would do is remake. All he did every season was reset it and remake the last season again. And he was doing it right back in Alias. It would just reset at the end. It would come to some dramatic conclusion, and then the next series would start, and everything was just back to the start again at that. But what about everything that happened before? Oh, now we're on to something else, and that was it. You moved on. And it always stuck with me at the time that was bad writing. It was a bad way to do it. And it lost me as a fan because of that. And ever since then, I've never liked any stuff. So she chooses that. She chose Johnson, and whether Johnson's a good filmmaker or not, a lot of people will argue he is. He was given no direction. He was just given carte blanche to do what he wanted. He wasn't himself, by his own words, thinking about what happened next after that. He was just thinking about his little corner of the universe. And Kennedy allows that to happen. And then we have the director problems,
directors leaving. Like I said, 9 directors
and that's
for
because she chose
5
the wrong
films
people to begin with. Sometimes,
yeah, there's a lot, but her contract's coming up. You don't think it's going to be renewed, right?
I think they'd be crazy to at this point.
Yeah, I don't think.
I think they need to try and get the fans back, and one of the ways, unfortunately for her, that they can get some of the fans back. They might stop Hatton more if they get rid of her. She has to be the sacrificial lamb.
It's not even going to be a sacrifice. She gets to leave at the end of a contract without being fired, with billions of dollars made.
Yeah, and she can say, my era was a success. Look, we had one flop film, but we launched into Disney Plus with a really successful show. We had a really successful conclusion to the sequel trilogy. Look at the money it made, and I'm happy that people are still talking about Rian Johnson's movie, because that means it will live in your memory for a long time. Yeah. And she's moved on, and
I still stand by.
Whoever gets the gig ushers in a better era of Star Wars content than what we've had since Disney took over.
I still stand by. Nobody offers Johnson his trilogy except her. So without her, there is no Rian Johnson trilogy. I still stand by that.
I'd let him write. I'd let him develop it, but I wouldn't give him carte blanche to just make a trilogy based on what he did. I'd be like, well, what's your treatment? Oh, well, I haven't quite worked it out yet, but well, do you know what, Ryan? See, when you have sat down and actually done some work, and you've wrote a possible idea for 3 films,
like
a plan
for your trilogy,
and a bit
right?
more for the first one. No, I'll just write the first one, and then I'll see where I go for the next one. No, then you're not getting the job, son. See you later. Bye.
No, I don't think. I'm like you.
And if he had a treatment, and I like the idea of it, I'd be willing to hire him again, because I think it's not necessarily. But I would have somebody that would be there to tell him, Ryan, you can't do that. That you kind of don't really want to push that into this side of things at the moment. So in terms of like how he behaves with the world building aspects, because I don't think he was very responsible with that stuff.
And I'm not the one of the Last Jedi haters, fuck Rian Johnson type guys, but no. I seriously don't think he has a job with Star Wars.
I think he's a good movie
Kathleen
maker.
Kennedy.
I don't think he's the right person to be making Star Wars films.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap this 3-hour thing that you said wouldn't last an hour and a half. Let's wrap it up with 2 last things. You have a 3-day weekend, an unlimited supply of booze and pizza, and you have it in your mind to watch nothing but Star Wars until your Star Wars mind has been satiated. What films, and in what order? Saga films only. So Rogue One, Clone Wars, and Solo are not included. Saga films only. Okay. What are you watching?
It's just the first 3. The Star Wars trilogy. I watched the Star Wars trilogy because that's the only trilogy that exists in my head now. That's I don't care about the rest. It's just not good enough.
Right.
So just
right.
The original trilogy. Boom.
Right this moment, I'm with you. However, I will say this. when Rise of Skywalker comes out on home video, I'm gonna try something. I know I said I would never watch a prequel trilogy movie again without monetary compensation. No. Oh God, no. I'm thinking of doing my own machete order.
Right.
So I'm
go for it.
I'm thinking 4.
4.
Then I gotta kind of do a little research. It's either 4-5-3 or 4-3-5-6-7-9. Because I know some people do 4-2-3-5-6. As far as their traditional machete order, but I'm wondering if you put 4-5, go back to 3. And make it a flashback after, like it's Vader reflecting on his thing.
I'm still going to look at it and go.
No, I don't think it necessarily will. But I'm thinking. I'm thinking. I fucking hate that. Vader? You know, I fucking hate the.
Which would no.
But I'm curious about what that narratively. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it, but that's something I've questioned experimenting with. And then I also thought about experimenting just watching 7 and then 9. Like 9 comes out on home video. Like 9 comes out on home video right before I watch 9 again. Watch 7 and then watch 9 and see how that works. But I'm with you. 4, 5, 6.
I never bought 8, and I'm not buying 9 when it comes out. Oh, saying that though, this is the thing that might bugger this up, because my son loves the Rise of Skywalker because he's 12, and it's just there's no, you don't need depth at 12. Palpatine's back. Cool shit happened. Remember when this bit happened, Dad? Remember when that bit happened, Dad? Yeah, son, that's absolutely fine. Babu Frick was amazing. Yeah, he was great, you know. And, you know, so when it comes out, he's probably going to be like, Dad, can I get the Rise of Skywalker? And, you know, if he wants it, he can get it for his birthday, his Christmas, something like that. I don't know when it comes out, or use his own money to buy it if he wants. So it will be in my household.
I'll have it. I have all nine movies. None of the Blu-rays. I have all DVDs.
Well, I have them all,
except I do have Blu-rays for 7 and 8.
The Last Jedi. I don't have Solo or The Last Jedi.
I don't have Solo. I don't have Solo. I'll never buy that piece of shit.
I would never buy it either.
My son also, I asked him walking out of the theater, which of course is the wrong time to ask it, because whatever's the last thing you saw. If my son was walking out of Captain Marvel and I asked him what was his favorite Marvel film, at that moment he probably at 6 years old would have said Captain Marvel.
At that point, no way.
Yeah.
Nobody walks into Captain Marvel and
I
says,
don't know.
That was the best Marvel film ever.
Before
anybody thinks, oh, they're bashing on women. Equally, you don't walk out of. I don't think you don't walk out of Doctor Strange and think, that's the best Marvel film I've ever seen.
I think my 6-year-old son does. I think he does. I think whatever the last thing he walks out of is his favorite. Because I asked him, I said, Lucas, and yes, ladies and gentlemen, my son's name does come from that Lucas, even though you hear me constantly curse his name. He did give us A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi. But I asked Lucas, I said, son, you've seen A New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. You've seen The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and now you just saw The Rise of Skywalker. What's your favorite? Oh, and I also said Rogue One and Solo, because he's seen those. I said, what's your favorite Star Wars movie? And he said The Rise of Skywalker. He was fully engaged at 6 years old, dude. He watched that movie from beginning to end without getting up, without getting anxious, fidgety, and he was engaged by it. It moves incredibly fast, has a lot of flashy shit, and yeah. But I'm with you. 4, 5, and 6.
I think, because it's still got a lot of depth to it. They don't notice the plot holes, or as my son will do, my son will watch some YouTuber that's also 12 going, so guys, I'm going to explain to you today why all the plot holes that everybody's saying exist in the Rise of Skywalker don't actually exist. So I'm going to go through them all today, and we're going to see that they're not actually plot holes. And it's, stuff like that, and he'll watch that and go, but I watched this thing. Well, so, because somebody else your age come up with it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a plot hole. Actually, if what are they going to, explain this or stuff to us, it's crazy. But this is the kind of stuff you've got out there, unfortunately, because you do have fans of all ages. And I think it's okay for young people to like something that people our age don't. I think that's okay, Sometimes there's stuff that's intended for them that I can secretly like as well. It has something that appeals to me as well. But the sweet spot, as we went right back to at the start, when we started talking about the prequel trilogy, is to try, and where Star Wars should be in it, is something that hits everyone. And I don't feel like anything's hit the more mature audience since the old trilogy, to be honest. I know some of our colleagues in LRM would say The Last Jedi was the one that did that. But I think that also... depending on what you're looking for in a film, I can see that. But I don't think it was the way to do Star Wars like that.
So very, 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 very last curiosity. Do you think the 12-year-olds of today have the same reverence for the sequel trilogy that the under 30s have for the prequel trilogy, or do you think they grow and see the saga in its entirety and see the flaws in it?
I don't know. I find it hard to predict, because when, the people that are doing what we are doing just now then will be them. And they'll be going back and looking at, we'll be too old by then, Kyle. And I certainly will be. Maybe not you, because you're only 25, 10 levels up.
The prequel trilogy ended in 2005, so it's 15 years ago. So let's say 15 years from now, we should be hearing some kids talking about the sequel trilogy. 15
no one's going
years.
to care what a 56-year-old thinks about Star Wars.
No, I'm just curious if you think that they're going to have the reverence for their trilogy, the sequel trilogy that the kids for the prequel trilogy had.
There is still a lot of people who were younger and liked the prequel trilogy who have grown up and seen sense. It's not as if everybody who is of a... Because we can't pigeon everybody by and just say, it depends when you were born. It's because you were born then. It doesn't... They're so... It's
not a guarantee.
I know it's subjective, but the prequels are so much worse than what you got originally. It's unbelievable. And even if you liked The Last Jedi, even if you liked it, you probably, anybody who liked The Last Jedi doesn't really like The Rise of Skywalker, because it does go in the wrong direction. So you're probably thinking now the same thing about the sequel trilogy. I know, like, when we speak to Nick, he's like, Star Wars, not interested in it anymore, B-movie crap to me now, and I've got a lot of friends like that as well. It just doesn't mean as much to them anymore, because it's just, it doesn't have the same kind of impact that it used to have. So there are going to be some that grow up like that, but I think by the law of averages, you're also going to have some people that will grow up and claim that the sequel trilogy was actually the greatest thing ever to exist.
Yeah. I think that'll happen.
There has to be people like us here to say, no. We were here when it happened.
You are mistaken about a great many things.
They were flying by the seat of their pants, and no one knew what they were doing from day one at Disney. Because that's what it feels like.
I'll say this, Cam. The last 12 episodes. More because some of our episodes are split in half. But going over 11 movies and this Post-Mortem has been a lot of fun. So thank you. If we don't continue on with this podcast, thank you for being a part of it for the last year. It's been a lot of fun. I really mean that. Yeah, and to all of our guests, Brian Brantley, Fox Troilo, Joseph Jammer Medina, Nick Dahl, and James Burns joined us for the Rise of Skywalker episode. Thank all of you guys for being a part of it, and to the audience, of course, always thank you guys so much for listening and keeping this little idea I had over a year ago alive, and we are open to keep it alive. Let us know what you would like to see Last Call become moving forward. Do you want us to review Mandalorian just to keep it going one more time, or do you want us to continue and look at reviewing all of the Clone Wars and the new season
about stuff
stuff? Leave it in the comments below. And also make sure you check out the written article at lrmonline.com, because all of the guests that have been a part of Last Call have left us their viewing order, and it's in the write-up for this podcast, just in case you came here directly through a podcast subscription channel versus lrmonline.com. Go check out the write-up, the article, and see what everyone else's viewing order is, and leave your viewing order. If you machete anything, if you cut any trilogies completely out, if you're like me and Cam and just do 4, 5, and 6, let us know in the comments below. Make sure you guys check out lrmonline.com every single day for all your entertainment news needs. The YouTube channel's got a lot of great content there, and there's lots of wonderful shows right here on the LRM Online Podcast Network, like LR Mornings every Monday through Friday, Breaking Geek Radio, the podcast on Mondays, LRM Ranks It on Wednesdays, and of course Los Fanboys on Fridays. Cam, where can people find you at online?
At LRM_Cam on Twitter. You can find me at lrmonline.com. Writing stories or editorial pieces on weekdays. Jump into the comments for the specific stories. Always like to chat to the readers on there, because you're fans as well, and just like to hear people's different opinions.
You guys can find me at that Kyle Malone on Twitter. Thank you guys so much for listening, and may the Force be with you.